Okay, very good. Thank you very much. It is 6:35 on February 3rd, 2022. Welcome to the Sherborn Select Board meeting. I'd like to call this meeting to order, and I'd like to ask the town administrator to please read the agenda.
Hi, good evening. So after I get through reading the agenda, the board can either vote to amend the agenda or approve the agenda as read. At 6:30, we'll go into executive session, and the board will return to open session after that is ended. Item 1 will be to meet with town council to discuss a complaint letter dated August 16th, 2021 from Jonathan Hudson Walker and Lisa Hudson Walker of Silverwood Farm LLC against the Conservation Commission pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21A, 1, 3, and 7, and Suffolk Construction versus DCAM 449 Mass 444 parentheses 2007, and item 2, to discuss strategy with respect to threatened potential litigation if the chair so declares that an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the litigating position of the select board and the town, and the chair does so declare to discuss the town library pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21A, 3, and 7, and Suffolk Construction versus DCAM 449 Mass 444 2007. The board will need a second and a roll call. And when that is done, we'll come back to open session and have a public comment. There'll be a consent agenda with draft minutes, a payroll warrant, next scheduled meeting dates, and consideration of a possible Saturday meeting date for February 12, 2022, with a review of warrant article proponents, and also consideration of a 6:30 p.m. start time moving forward. Item 2 will be a COVID update with Darrell Beardsley from the Board of Health. Item 3 will be consideration of request for ARPA funds from Darrell Beardsley of the Board of Health. Item 4 is consideration of appointment. It's a new hire to the Sherborn Police Department. It is being brought forward by Chief Thomas Galvin. And number 5 is a consideration of the interim finance director reappointment for another 60 days. Then we'll have FY23 omnibus budget and maybe capital items from the DPW, town buildings, transfer station budget will be brought to you by Sean Colleen. Recycling budget will be Charles Tyler, chair of the recycling committee. The select board budget, legal budget, and a new IT budget. A sustainability department budget, which is new, which will be brought forth by Dorothea Von Herder. Then the annual town meeting draft warrant checklist. North Sherborn Water District, formation of a working group as requested by Marion Nutra. Lease agreement for Sherborn Community Center and other cell tower lease agreements. Consideration of appointment to the town administrator search committee. Then the last item will be consideration of routine business, select board reports, and interim town administrator reports.
Thank you, Ms. Schneider. Do I have any motions relative to the agenda?
Yes, I move that we reverse the order of the 2 executive sessions to do the library first, followed by the item 1, which is the Silverwood Farms, and that we I'm also moved that we enter into executive session.
Okay, although technically I have to move the executive session, I believe, but
Okay, that's fine.
So just because we have no council necessary for item 2, we have council necessary for item 1. They're running a little behind, so I think that's a good idea.
Well, Michael's here. Michael just joined. We can do whichever you want, but we can just go to executive session.
Let's go to executive session.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay, nevertheless, I second Jeff's motion.
Okay, very good. All in favor, Jeff?
Aye.
Marianne?
Aye.
George?
Aye.
And Paul?
Aye.
And I am as well. All right. As chair, I declare that executive session is warranted for the agenda items as previously just read by the town administrator, and therefore I move that we go into executive session. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay. All in favor, Jeff?
Aye.
Marianne?
Aye.
George?
Aye.
And Paul?
Aye.
And just while we're still being recorded, I forgot to mention that we will return into open session for the remaining agenda. Thank you very much. We are now returned from executive session. It is 7:01. We're surprisingly timely. Back into open session now. We're resuming our agenda with agenda item number 1. Agenda item number 1, the consent agenda. Do I have any motions or comments relative to consent agenda? And before someone moves to approve, I do have a comment. So are there any comments on it?
I have a comment.
Okay, please go ahead, George.
I know we're trying to schedule this Saturday meeting and the 12th might be tough for me, but I know the next week is the beginning of school vacation week. So I don't know what week is going to work for everybody, but my daughter has a lacrosse tournament all day, the 12th. So an indoor lacrosse tournament down in Taunton, but
I mean, this Saturday meeting is exactly why I wanted to have some discussion as well. We touched on it briefly, I think, in the last meeting. And the 12th, it's probably no good time to some extent. The only other thing I can think of is there another evening? And the whole purpose of the meeting is just to basically just be dedicated to the non-fiscal items of the town meeting warrant, to start to go through and, 39 total items on there. They take away the capital, you take away the fiscal, and, still a lot to talk about. We could try like an additional, I don't know if every Thursday is going to work, because I'm not sure, but I suspect once we form the town administrator search committee, that those will probably be every other Thursday in between the select boards, like it was with the police. I think, what I plan to do is we'll form the committee tonight. I'll probably make the first meeting, the first Thursday without a select board. That'll be, I think, the 17th. And there we'll form a structure and see what days are good with people and so on like that. But assuming that all those gaps will be filled, then the only thing I can think of maybe a Tuesday possibly. My Tuesdays can sometimes get iffy this time of year because the Framingham City Council meets on Tuesdays.
the last tournament my daughter had, we weren't allowed in anyway, so there's a chance I'm probably not going to be able to go. So I just need to check with my wife that she can get her to and from Taunton, and I could be available on the 12th.
Okay.
I think because the other factor is, we got advisory hearing on the 26th of March, and they have to post notice like the 18th of March. So we can't really, with the school break week, we can't go too deep into February, or we won't be ready for advisory.
Right.
In general, the town calendar is least busy on Mondays and Fridays.
Yeah.
So
I could do, Fridays are tough for me, but I could do Mondays.
Yeah, Monday actually is probably, you're absolutely right, Marianne. And it's not just here, but I think it's most communities. So myself and Paul are dedicated to other communities, might be more available on a Monday as well. So do you want to set a Monday now, or do you want to see what's up next week to see how George does with his Saturday the 12th? Do you know what I mean?
And it doesn't take till next week. My wife she's actually got my daughter at lacrosse practice now, but I got to, let me check with her later on and I can email you tomorrow, Eric.
Okay. So I doubt we'll make it next Monday, the 7th. The next one after that's the 14th. And I know I don't have a life. I'm probably not going out on the 14th, but a lot of people do things on February 14th. Other than the next one after that would probably be, and that's President's Day is the 21st. It might be the 28th. All right, let's see how it goes with George's schedule. It's something we definitely want the full board in when we talk about, these items. No question about it.
Sorry about that. And then the other thing was the 6:30 start time. I am good with that through but then again, lacrosse season starts coming April. And no, Thursday nights might be okay though, because I think they may have Monday, Wednesday practices. So let me double check on that. We don't have the calendar yet. So stick with it for now through March, because this is our busiest time of year anyway. And then kind of, if you guys are okay with it, I'll update you as my schedule becomes more clear.
And we'll also do it because, I mean, there's twofold reason of doing it. One, you do, kind of get on it a little better. But two, having executive session early, we actually spend less on legal fees because the lawyers, they start logging on around 8 and 9, whatever, maybe like 8. And then they come on at like 11 on these long. So this whole town meeting period, we just simply have long meetings. And another thing I noticed, and I think it's safe to say this, we're in an executive session, is that we're just less effective. When we meet in an executive session, everyone's tired. They want to get done the things, and we're making very important decisions. And I think doing it while we're fresh is just simply important because frankly, the decisions we make in these executive sessions are some of the most important decisions we make in any meetings. So worst comes to worst, I'm even willing, frankly, to do executive at 7 and have the open start at 7:30. That. Okay. So
In the
let's
meantime, let's go with 6:30. Let's
Yeah.
try it out, and
Yep.
if that works for everybody else.
Do it until we can. Okay, so it sounds like we'll just keep the consent agenda as is. At least what's written on there. At least have a good discussion.
Yeah,
Yep.
All right, so now that
one-
sorry, Marion.
Sorry, one question before you leave it. The sessions, the extra sessions for warrant article proponents review, is one meeting going to be enough?
I don't know. I hope so. And I think we plan on one, and maybe meeting goes up to 4 hours or something, see how it goes, and then do another one as needed, almost like town meeting itself. You don't know how many nights it's going to go until you finish the first night.
Right, so it sounds as if we did a Monday, and we could do any Monday, as far as I can see, for me anyway, there are more free Mondays than there are other days, so
Yeah.
that might be a good option.
Yeah. And
Like I
I
said,
think the next Monday that would be available would be the 28th, so.
Because the 14th
First
is
is
Valentine's.
President's Day, and I'll be away, and the 14th.
Oh, all right, okay, I missed that, okay.
Yeah, so I think if we don't finish everything on the 12th, we could plan on maybe putting one on the 28th of that Monday.
Okay.
Yeah. That's a good point. And I can be honest, I mean, I know it's a Saturday, but I'll have trouble going more than 4 or 5 hours. I think our last Saturday one we did with the advisory went like 9 or 10. Okay, so now do I have motion relative to the consent agenda?
So I move that we approve the consent agenda as read by the interim town administrator, with the exception of still considering the Saturday session to be determined
Yeah.
next week's select board meeting.
Second.
Okay, all in favor? Jeff,
All right.
Marianne,
Aye.
George,
Aye.
Paul?
Aye.
I might as well. Great, thank you. And now agenda item number 2, COVID update. Daryl, while you weren't in the meeting, Mike volunteered you, so. See Daryl.
Okay,
Matt
and
did.
yes, I'm going to volunteer Matt Vitale to give you an update. I've been rather distracted by work and he can give you the details. And I'll weigh in if you need me.
Okay,
I do assure them that I like the sound of my own voice, so I'm certainly happy to. So I sort of have 2 parts, and so I'll do the general COVID update, and then if it makes sense to you guys can sort of segue that into the ARPA request. So in terms of what we are seeing, we look at this data weekly. Historically, it's been a 2-week data period. I think in the most recent Omicron mediated surge that kind of results in a dulling of both the uptrend and the downtrend. And so right now, the data that we release in that regard on a weekly basis will tend to lag behind the sort of instantaneous rate of decline as cases have been declining rapidly. I checked 12 minutes ago, and this week's data is not yet updated. As of last week, we were about twice, 2.5 times our peak from last winter, but much decreased from our most recent peak. We still have above average rates of test positivity in the combined communities of Dover and Sherborn that are commensurate or generally lower than surrounding communities, so still markedly elevated from where we were sort of prior to the Omicron surge. In general, our vaccine uptake data has been really robust locally. Our booster uptake has been more modest, and I think that's particularly important with what we see with Omicron in general, that for the primary vaccination series, it's still pretty protective against hospitalization and death, but is less effective in preventing symptomatic infection, particularly for those folks who are further out from their primary series. We don't yet know if that same data generalizes to the 5 to 11 kids who were newly eligible for vaccine. So overall, I think we're sort of seeing a general good news story, but it's sort of not back to normal quite yet, although clearly trending in that direction. The best real-time indicator is the MWRA wastewater data, which again is close to its pre-Omicron baseline, but it's a little bit hard to interpret their graph because the Omicron surge was so much higher than everything else that it sort of broke the y-axis. So even a very dramatic elevation compared to our baseline is still much lower than our recent peak. But again, I think overall a good news story. And then on the hospitalization and death side, we're seeing a clear decrease in hospitalizations. The current peak has been higher for total hospitalizations than last winter's peak, although it has clearly begun its downtrend. Death tends to be a lagging indicator, so it'll be the last to rise and the last to drop. And so we're not seeing a significant downtrend in that yet, though I expect we'll see that in the next couple of weeks. And then in terms of other data for the discussion of the sort of admitted with COVID and admitted from COVID, I think it's sort of a distinction without a difference in some ways in terms of the intensity and the challenges on the healthcare system for having access to private rooms and ED boarding times, but really in terms of interpreting disease severity does mean something, and that's been running about 50-50 in Massachusetts. It can vary a little bit about what which part of Metro Boston you're in, but that's a reasonable measure. So I think that was sort of the big COVID situational updates. I'm happy to answer any questions if there are any, or if you guys see fit, happy to talk about the ARPA fund request whenever that's appropriate.
Just a quick question.
Sure.
Be it locally or even nationally, what is the, I guess, I don't need the numbers, but the approximation of like, deaths and hospitalizations for Omicron versus previous strains such as Delta?
So overall, I think the data gets hard to interpret in that with COVID and from COVID is an important piece in that regard. So for example, we have many people who may be admitted in childbirth or following a motor vehicle accident where COVID is in no way diagnostically related to their admission, but it's identified, and sort of parsing that out is hard. But what that means is when you have really high community prevalence, that will be more and more common in terms of minimally symptomatic infection. One of the measures we use is a measure called the infection fatality rate, which is looking for all infections. How likely is that to result in death? A morbid measure, but an important one. And we've seen that drop dramatically over the course of the pandemic. So it's about, the last data I saw was from last week, and it was somewhere between 10 and 20% of what it was at its peak. So like an 80 or 90% reduction in fatality from infection. The particular sample for that was in a heavily vaccinated population, which will certainly skew it. And we do see sustained benefits around both hospitalization and death. With anybody who's completed the primary vaccination, there's an added benefit to the booster. But sort of overall has been good. If we look at the ratio of how likely are you to be admitted if you become infected, we see that you're much less likely. So if we sort of compare our surges and say, my case peak is this high, how high is my hospitalization peak? With the most recent peak, we hit numbers that were 4 and 5 times our previous case peak, and we're about 1.2 times our hospitalization peak. So we see it's much less likely to result in hospitalization, although it's hard to parse out from that how much of that is that in that last surge, many fewer people who were infected were vaccinated, and how much is intrinsic to Omicron, which is a source of some ongoing discussion. But I think the general consensus is that Omicron appears to be at least somewhat less severe, and there's a benefit from both prior natural infection and widespread vaccination that are also reducing those hospitalization and death rates in patterns that are encouraging. For people who are admitted, when you say you've gotten sick enough to get to the hospital, which sort of takes away some of the Omicron piece, what we're seeing is that the rates of transfer to the ICU is much lower than it was with Delta, so something like 40 to 50% lower, and the likelihood of dying from your infection is also significantly reduced. So I think the kind of global state we're in for a given case count is definitely a much lower proportion, resulting in really tragic outcomes, which is fabulous.
That's nice. Thank you. Any other questions from the board? Any questions from the public? Ask people to use raise hand feature. Okay. Feel free to go on to the ARPA funds request. Agenda item number 3.
Perfect. And so I think as we, some of this came up in the context as we work with the Health and Hygiene Advisory Group, working with both representation from the Dover Board of Health and kind of answering questions and giving info to the school district, but I think it's also part of a larger conversation, is to think about what does our next phase look like as a community, as it relates to COVID and as it relates to trying to figure out, what pieces of normal can come back and how do we best support what I suspect are common community goals of saying, there's a lot of life in 2019 we collectively liked and would love to see come back. How do we think about how to do that safely as we deal with a virus that may be less morbid, but is becoming or has become more contagious? And one of the strategies that one can consider as we think about social movement and social connections and how important that is, and kind of to George's earlier point about the appeal of being able to say, we've got a lacrosse tournament, I'd love to see my kid, I want to be inside. How do we help support those goals together to say, like, let's make this really successful? And I think access to antigen testing and having a little bit of resilience in that system is one of the ways that we can really help say, how do we get big chunks of normal back around things that are important to our kids, important to each other, important to our communities at large, while still managing the risk of saying, with this being very contagious, identifying infections early and compartmentalizing it is a really important strategy to reduce the risk of spread. And so for us on health and hygiene, a lot of that focuses on the sort of priorities that we've articulated, which is saying our number one goal is for school to be safe, and a very close number two goal is for school to be in person, and kind of uncontrolled infection or patterns of school-based spread are things that threaten that. And so one of the strategies we've talked a lot with the school is about how testing can help support in-person school, can support as we make the transition ultimately to mask optional environments or other things. How do we do that? And so I think at the state level, DESE's provided some really wonderful support. And so students in the district will get a test every other week. And there are other parts that can be really helpful, both for having ready access for symptomatic testing or for using the antigen test for surveillance testing. But we certainly can expect to see some patterns of spread that would make us want to be able to do kind of higher density testing in a specific scenario. So I don't want to kind of pin down, this is exactly the scenario and this is exactly what we do, because we kind of tailor it to everyone. But you could imagine if you had a school-based exposure or a rec team exposure or a local church exposure, something else where you said, boy, we're seeing a lot of cases for this. How do we mitigate? How do we kind of try to break this cycle of spread? Having access to testing that we can sort of offer to that community, I think is one of the things we can do to really reduce the risk of what we call secondary transmission. So in those cases, you want to say, hey, I found the person who's infected. We can now implement the behaviors that reduce the risk of them spreading it to others, so that if my 10-year-old gets infected and I know it, I can take strategies that reduce the risk of infection to my 7-year-old. That then reduces the likelihood of my 7-year-old infecting a different 7-year-old at school or in the community. And so I think on the school side, having some resilience there makes sense. In general, I would also recommend having some modest stockpile so that if an issue comes up, we can say, great, we have a set of tests that we can use to do this. I would not recommend that we use ARPA funds to buy individual tests that we sort of distribute, just because I don't think the bang's worth the buck, but having some relatively small assembly of tests that can be deployed if there is something, whether it's a school-based exposure or some other community exposure, would be, I think, prudent. I think the request as submitted was for 500 test kits and 1,000 tests. I think on follow-up with the district, I think we could probably reduce that by half to 500 tests, 250 test kits. Although I sort of arrived at that conclusion too late for Ellen to update the form. So I'd estimate that to be at approximately 50% of the value listed, or about $6,500. But we can definitely get an updated quote for that. Just the week kind of got away from me. So I'm happy to kind of pause there for questions or feedback or concern. And ultimately it's up to you guys. This would be my 2 cents of, I've never heard somebody say, boy, we've got too many masks or too many tests. And so I think having a relatively modest stockpile gives us a little resilience. But I can imagine no $6,000, I'd be more enthusiastic about having wasted than to never need the stockpile and to say, gosh, we didn't need any of it. That would love it. I'd be so happy.
Okay, I see Marianne has a question. Go ahead, Marianne.
Matt, given all that we've learned about the value of quick antigen tests for, return to school or return to work or whatever, it seemed I was going to go in the other direction than you went. I was going to say, is 500 enough? And it seems to me kind of maybe this is an opportunity to get a stockpile of tests that would allow the Board of Health and the schools or the community to respond to situations that could still arise. You know, we still have enough Omicron percolating around that there may be use for quite a lot of tests. And I thought that the request is a modest one, even at 500. So why not go with 500?
I would say I'm entirely flexible. I think there are two approaches. I think if we order 500 kits, it makes it less likely that we'll need to come back for another bite at the apple. If we order 250, my general impression is I think antigen testing remains tight, but less tight than it was 2 months ago. And so it seems like the supply chain is intact enough that if we need to go back and make another request because we find that we are using them, that it seems like we'll be able to get access to that. So it's a little bit trying to thread the needle. And then I just have all the town meetings playing in my head. And I feel like if there's one of my take homes, it's that if I can not spend money, people really prefer that. You know, if I were king of the world, I'd be perfectly fine saying I'm also equally happy having wild enthusiasm for if we spend 12 grand and we don't use it, that would make me perfectly content. From my standpoint, you know, I think, you know, having the 500 kits, 1,000 tests would certainly not be unreasonable. You know, I think we're just encouraged with things on the school supply side, partly because DESE has restrictions on how we can use the tests. And there are times that we'd say, we think that more testing makes us safer. And we'd like to be able to do that and still be compliant with DESE. Both Dover, what we've discussed with Dover is that Dover would make a contribution of tests to that stockpile and that we would make a smaller contribution because we've got fewer residents. But it sounds like at least in the last check-in with Dover, I think it's still worth doing, but as you know, the school piece is at least in good shape. I think for me, I do worry the rec programs are one that having some testing would be really appealing because it's a place where we've seen exposures and being able to have a strategy to say, hey, we've got a team-based exposure and this family carpool to make this thing work. You know, it's a place that, God, I'd love to have testing. And that's a kind of piece I think having that larger supply opens up more. And I think the other key piece for that is in those scenarios, you really want to have multiple tests. Like ideally, you'd like to say, we're going to test you for several days every other day, where something like a return to work might be more like a one-time test. And so that's the other argument for the
my point exactly. I mean, it's a modest amount of money. We have the ARPA funds. It seems to me that it would give you more flexibility to have the tests on hand. But, you know.
And give you one data point from our Boy Scout troop, because we have two Framingham boys in the Boy Scout troop. Framingham High School has 30% of the students have Omicron, and they've canceled after school sports and all after school activities.
I'd like to recognize Daryl because her hand is raised.
I wasn't really expecting the discussion to go in the direction of, gee, maybe we should get more tests. But I believe that the school has also weighed in and had offered a projection of what they thought they might like to have on hand. And so the 250 would cover that at the moment, but I guess, and then the middle route might be, if you want to get more tests, that's great. We could check with the supplier to see what the deal is with this special program that's been set up by the state. Is this a short-term thing, a long-term thing? Do we need to take advantage of it now? I don't know that for sure.
I think the other thing we could clarify is also just the expiration date for the test batches we'll get. So I think if it's a shorter cycle expiration date, that might be an argument to do sort of 2 aliquots rather than one big one if it's going to be a relatively short interval of viability.
Yeah, I appreciate that. But on the other hand, if we allocate the funds, then you have them for the second aliquot when you need them. And I think that's better than having to go through the whole process over again.
Well, I would like to say something, actually. What I would like to do, and I thought, is actually authorize them to buy 2 sets of 250 at a time. So they don't have to come back to us, but they're also not stuck with this stockpile of stuff that we didn't need. I understand we have the ARPA funds, but with absolutely no plan whatsoever, we've burned through over $250,000 of these ARPA funds. And, I'm very sensitive about that. And so, but this is obviously something that's important. And I don't think they have to go through the burden and we have to, approve the additional, but if they have the ability to order 250 and we just simply authorize to order 250. And then if they need more, authorize another 250. You know what I mean? Like right now, do you know what I mean? So they don't do it, but to authorize, like, tell them to go order 500, that seems a little unnecessary, particularly if current projections show that 250 is necessary. You know what I mean? So that's a thought that I have, that at least like people's thoughts on.
I think that's perfect.
Yeah, Paul?
I am worried about the test becoming obsolete from sitting around and not being used. And it's much better, I think, and probably easier to get the lower quantity. So I like the idea of not putting all your eggs in one basket and then discovering when you actually need it, they're all expired and useless. So I like the idea of authorizing 250 now and giving authority if needed to go to another 250 without having to come back to the board. I think that's a great idea.
And then if a year from now, they never bought the second 250, then we kind of remove the authorization and it gets used for something else or whatever it is.
Yes, yep. Yeah, I agree. So I'd make that motion if to implement what Eric had described.
Okay.
And I'll second it. I'll second the motion.
Okay, motion and a second. All in favor, Jeff, sorry.
Aye.
Marion?
Aye.
George?
Aye.
Paul?
Aye.
And I might as well. Okay. Thank you both very much. Thank you, Daryl. Thank you, Matt. Well, I think I accidentally called Mike, but thank you, Matt.
I'll take it. I'll also answer to Mark.
All right. And thank you for everything you do following this. Yeah, Paul?
Before you go on to the next agenda item, can I just say a word about the recent passing of Dora Heffron?
Sure.
We didn't have public comment. If you don't know Dora, she's the wife of Fran Heffron. She worked in the town in the assessor's office for many years. Fran was our former fire chief. She passed away, and I think it would be appropriate to extend the town's sympathy to Fran Heffron for the loss of his wife and for their family. He's got a family of adult children and grandchildren and so on. So in memory of her and appreciation for her service to the town and Fran's service to the town, I want to extend our sympathy and condolences. Thank you.
Well said. Thank you, Paul. Okay. So moving on to number 4, agenda item, consideration of appointment, a new hire to Sherborn Police Department, Chief Thomas Galvin. And I guess the new hire is Owen Robbins, but please go ahead, Chief. There you are. Are you muted? Actually, you're not muted, but I don't hear you. Is your speaker not working?
No, I think he's getting organized. Give him a minute.
Oh, sorry.
Oh,
He is muted.
no, he's not.
No, you know what it is? A speaker might not be working in the setup. Oh.
How about now? Do you hear me now?
Yes. Yep.
All right. Yeah, I had to change the microphone. Sorry about that. But so as the police chief, there's a lot of reasons that I end up in front of the select board, but kind of none is more exciting than bringing on a new police officer. And just happy to be here for that tonight. But this hiring process actually began before I was even I started as the police chief here in town. They began a process to replace Officer Michaud, who had resigned to return to his previous employment with Bentley College. And Sergeant Tedstone, Sergeant Nolte, and Officer Exarchopoulos were selected as a review panel. They reviewed resumes and interviewed several candidates. I was actually fortunate on a couple of visits to town before I started to actually sit in on a couple of the final interviews. And then as the process moved forward, unfortunately, we had another resignation. and we had a second vacancy. So as the process concluded, we had three excellent candidates to move forward with. We selected two to complete background investigations. Unfortunately, one of those candidates was quickly eliminated based on the background. We do have another candidate that a background has begun, but we did complete our background investigation of Owen Robbins. And those of you that know Detective Godino, that any investigation that he completes is with a fine-tooth comb. So we do know that we have a very well vetted candidate. Owen's a 2020 graduate of Norwich University with a Bachelor of Arts in Criminal Justice. He's currently a Gold Bar recruiter for the Vermont National Guard and a senior military instructor for Norwich University ROTC. And he is a lieutenant in the Vermont National Guard. Owen grew up much closer than Vermont, graduating from West Boylston High School, and has volunteered in numerous endeavors in his lifetime. One thing also that I think you should know is that when we hire, we're taking an extreme risk. We're vetting a candidate, but we're bringing them into a position with great power and authority. And we, sometimes it's only limited knowledge that we have of these people. So I actually met Owen several years ago. He served as an intern when he was in high school, when I was in Berlin. And I was very fortunate to get to know him then. And he was a very nice young man at that point. And I kept in touch with him a little bit throughout his college career. And then now, just as circumstances land, he ends up here in Sherborn. And to kind of mitigate that risk and to know the type of person that Owen is, it really will help me, rest easier knowing the person that we're bringing in, and that we're not taking a real unknown risk in who this candidate is. And for that, I ask you to appoint Owen as our next police officer.
Great. Any questions or comments from the board? Yeah, George.
I just want to make a motion to Owen Robbins as recommended by the chief.
All right, do I have a second?
Second.
Second,
Right.
but I had a comment.
Yeah, go
before-
ahead. For discussion, absolutely, Paul.
Yeah, I think it's good that we do this hire. We needed the position to be filled. To the extent that we don't fill positions, then overtime has to kick in, and there's a bigger burden on our police force. I think this is a good hire. When I saw the resume, the fact that he had interned for Chief Galvin before, I thought was quite a plus, because he's a known quantity. So I think all this is very positive. I'd be happy to vote yes.
All right, very good. So we have a motion and a second. Looks like discussion is completed. All in favor, Jeff,
Aye.
Marianne,
Aye.
George,
Aye.
and Paul?
Aye.
I'm also aye. Thank you very much, Chief.
Thank you. And yeah, Owen's here tonight
Oh,
in the
there
meeting.
he is. Welcome aboard.
And
Welcome,
just
sure.
to fill you in, we have already secured a spot. Owen will be attending the Lowell Police Academy in May, but we will actually be bringing him in much quicker. He'll learn to work on the shifts on the desk and start to cover some of those shifts before he attends the police academy. So thank you very much.
Can
Thank
we
you.
have him say a few words so that the people in town can see and recognize him when they see him on the street?
Sure. Owen, you want to unmute?
There it goes.
Evening, everybody. As Chief Galvin has already stated, my name is Owen Robbins. I'm a 2020 graduate of Norwich University, and I'm currently a second lieutenant in the Vermont National Guard. I really am excited to start working here in the town of Sherborn. It really is a blessing to be able to continue my law enforcement career with Chief Galvin, who, as he said, I've known since I was just a young kid in high school. So this is a very unique and exciting opportunity for me, and I just really can't wait to get started. And I appreciate you guys' trust and confidence in me, and I hope I can make you guys proud. Thank you so much.
Very
And
well.
welcome
Welcome.
to Sherborn.
Yeah, welcome to Sherborn.
Absolutely. Okay, thanks, Owen. With no further ado, I'll move on to agenda item number 5, please. That's consideration of interim finance director reappointment for an additional 60 days. So Diane, are you speaking on? Okay, just right thing. Okay. I'll just make a comment. I think Desmond's doing a great job, and I definitely support this additional appointment. Any motions or questions from the board?
So moved.
Okay,
Second.
second by George. Okay, all in favor, Jeff,
Aye.
Marianne,
Aye.
George,
Aye.
Paul,
Aye.
I am I as well. All right, so now we get into the meat of the agenda. The omnibus budget. Capital, it says here capital items.
I don't think the capital,
Yeah.
Sean's not showing any capital items. I don't think there are any capital items that I know of.
I think this is the operational budget, is it not, Diane? I think it says capital
It
items. I
is,
just-
but I didn't know if he does have some capital items and I didn't know if he wanted to talk about those tonight as well. So I just put that there in case we had time to do that.
Okay, so we talk about
I
it.
think we should stick with operations tonight, and
Okay,
so if we're gonna do capital, maybe do it all at once on that Saturday.
it sounds like a plan. Sounds
Yep.
good to me.
'Cause again, I like to look at the big picture, and if we can look at all capital at once, that helps.
Absolutely.
So I'm going to share my screen for all the budget makers so we can look at the budget. If Diane, you want to watch to admit people in the room, because when I'm in shared screen, I may not see people entering the room, or I won't see raised hands for questions.
Sure, no problem.
Now, I know we talked about this a lot, and Sean and Deb gave us a pretty detailed run-up of their budget. You know, I suggest starting with the big picture, the overall net increase, decrease, and this, you know, rather than focus on every single item, focus on those items of which is a significant change from past years.
So is this visible now, the DPW summary?
Yep.
Yes.
If you can make it somehow a little bit more full screen,
I think that's,
or scroll it up, maybe scroll such that you can.
well,
the whole
yes, I
table
mean,
fits in
it's
it.
a giant spreadsheet.
There.
This is, I can't go any wider. If I make it any bigger, it's gonna
No.
go off.
Doesn't need to be wider, but I think if you scroll, like give it like half an inch, scroll, boom, right there. Now we can see the whole thing. And like every good manager, I look to the bottom right and see the total net increase of 0.64, and then.
Yep.
We're good.
Yeah,
We done here?
Yeah. So you can navigate me, Sean, wherever you want me to go.
I wasn't actually gonna start with, so
I know, where do you want to go? I'll go.
Yeah,
this,
You want to go?
I didn't mean to micromanage the thing, but
No,
I'm
that's
also trying
fine.
to streamline it a
I'm
little
using
bit.
Excel, so I'm in tabs.
Oh,
There's
wow.
not much to say about the actual budget, other than, you know, there's a couple items that are, you know, basically a risk for us right now. Which was easier to find in the,
I know, I just have what Deb sent me. Is there another sheet in here that you would prefer?
well, no, I had that in Excel, so the color actually shows up. So in the 420
Yeah.
tab, which you were just at, roll back up
Yeah.
to 420. Right there. I don't know. Go down one page. I should have driven.
I think so.
You'll see the fuel, gasoline. See, it's in a different font because it's red when it's Excel.
Yeah.
You can see the year-to-date highlights the fact that we're already over budget. A couple thousand. If I were to fill the fuel tanks today, we're passing that budget. Why is that? It's pretty obvious.
Yeah.
We budgeted the past few years. The biggest variable to volume is snow and ice, right? The police cruisers use pretty much the same amount of fuel every year. Most of the vehicles do, the equipment does. You know, it can shift a few thousand gallons of diesel in a heavy winter, but we have no control over the price. So
Can I make
it's
a,
no
why are
secret
we,
why we're busting the budget this year, and it's highly unlikely that number is going to hold good for next year. ahead,
why don't we budget higher then? I mean, we know it's gonna be higher than 50.
Yeah, I think we're gonna. We had a pretty lengthy discussion in advisory the other day, and I think what I'm going to do is resubmit to them I'll take the volume that we think we're going to have. Somebody looked it up actually during the meeting. I mean, I don't have a crystal ball. No one does. We don't know where that fuel is going to be 18 months from now. And again, you know, I did this budget right around Christmas time, so you could see where it was headed, but it's hard to predict. Again, six months ahead of when you're going to be there, and it certainly didn't turn the corner. So it's not. I don't think it's gonna. So
It is consistent, though. We deliberately under budget snow and ice, so it's the same, really sort of the same category.
But we haven't done that with gas. I mean, we have.
Right.
Yeah,
budgets
I know,
for the
but
year
this is-
based on what he's using. And you can see, I mean, we know gas prices were a lot lower in 20 and 21, but if you look back to 19 when they were higher, he was in. So I think that one is one that should fluctuate from year to year based on what our current prices are. I mean, it's not going to drop back to the level we had that quickly.
Well, could I suggest that may be the case, because not because the price will change, but because we as a board and we as a town need to move away from gasoline engines towards hybrids and towards other ways of doing this without creating all these greenhouse gases. We need to be sensitive about climate change. So if we start making the transition away from gasoline, hopefully this budget every year in the next few years is going to go down.
That's not going to change in the next year. We're not
But I
buying
can't-
all new equipment for the
there's
next year.
nothing I can
So
do
we're
for the
talking
fiscal
about-
23 budget.
Exactly. You're right on, Sean. I mean, that's a great idea for the future, but we're not replacing all the DPW trucks with electric vehicles in the next 3 months. So,
Or fire engines.
yeah, exactly. So we've got to be realistic with what we're paying on gas, not dreaming of having electric vehicles.
In the first electric vehicle purchase, I suspect will be the police cars, but we'll see.
Right. It will. And so we might see that start to shift 2 to 3 years from now.
Well, when we get to the capital budget, we start looking at equipment being bought, we can have this discussion.
Right.
And so, by the way, you just had gasoline on there. How do we feel diesel vehicles? Like equipment, heavy equipment?
What's the question?
How do we feel up heavy equipment? Is it all diesel or heavy equipment, or most of it?
Yeah. I mean, we've shifted, all the heavy equipment's diesel. Trucks have shifted. There's been a slight shift towards gasoline from diesel because of the cost of diesel and all the after fuel treatment.
Yeah.
So if you were to look at our total volumes, we've been shifting towards gas. We use significantly more gas because of the police cruisers, as a whole, not as a department, but as a whole, police, fire, and DPW.
Yeah. Does this line item include diesel?
This line item, even though it's called gasoline, that's an old term
All fuel.
in the
Okay,
budget
it's all
sheets,
fuel.
but it's all automotive fuel.
All right, got it.
John, can I
Okay.
make a suggestion that you use your line item from like 2019 and change the budget to that? That would be my suggestion, that you go with a budget that, is more in line with where the prices are, which would have been probably what you budgeted in the 62,000 that you budgeted back in 19.
Yeah, I think that's what we were looking at from advisory. We were talking about probably putting 65 in there
That makes sense to me.
based on what somebody looked at, what they looked up the futures prediction on the price, and I think they were talking, we might see a reduction of 20 cents per gallon this year, which is a little depressing. So, we can just forecast out the volume that we're going to use at that price. I can't do it offhand now, but that's probably what we're going to resubmit. On a happier note, Jeff, if you were to scroll down to the tab that shows 424, which is the second set of 3 numbers.
Where am I going?
The streetlights.
One more. Snow and ice just is snow and ice. We just take that as it's predicted.
Street lighting you wanted?
That's
No.
it. That's it right there. So for anyone that doesn't know, this year, this fiscal year, we purchased all the streetlights in town from Eversource. So historically, Eversource owned them, they operated them for us, and we just got one bill a month for all the lights, and it included the maintenance, the upkeep, and the electricity. once we purchased them, we paid a dollar and took that over. They immediately dropped the rate because they don't need to cover their maintenance anymore. So it more than, I think it was cut about 60% immediately from what we saw from the bills that started coming in. We got a grant. Gino secured us a grant, which purchased all 142 of them, new fixtures, new LED fixtures. So we were able to finish installing those. We had a deadline of the first of the year, and we got it done. I think December 29th we finished. We swapped them all over. So now we're going to see further reduction. I don't know exactly what that is, because the rate that they charge you is based on how many kilowatt hours you're using. So once you change over to the LED, it's going to drop again. So we took a best guess estimate to cover the rate that we'll be paying and include some maintenance. We don't exactly know what that maintenance is going to be. Brand new fixtures, we probably shouldn't touch them. But things happen when a tree falls and whacks into one and knocks it off. We have to fix that. So there's always going to be some upkeep on the system itself.
Sean,
Yes.
can I ask a question about another part of your budget? I looked through all your budget sheets, kind of looking for where the money for taking down trees comes from. And I understand you outsource that. You have a new RFP for a very limited number of trees, but it's a big sort of yearly expense, and I couldn't find it. Where is tree removal?
It's in the 429 tab, Jeff.
Where am I in?
You rolled past it.
425, 425.
424, you on the wrong way. Go to 429.
Yeah, but if I go down, it goes into the there's snow and ice. Now I'm in town hall. So
Oh, you're missing the sheet.
Yeah,
I don't
that's
think
not
I
on-
have it.
I don't-
Oh, that
we
explains
didn't
it
get that.
then.
We didn't get the sheet. That's not in our.
Oh,
I don't
so
see
that
it.
explains it. So anyway, I noticed your RFP was
Hey.
actually a very modest and limited one for tree removal. A very, relatively few of the tons of trees we have to remove. And so could you just tell us what your plan is for spreading that out over time, or it's a huge expense. And I'm wondering how you handle it.
Hold on one sec, because I'm going to email something to Jeff. Well, no, I'm not.
no, you can just talk to it, I think.
Okay, so there's two things. There's in the budget, the 429 sheet that you're not seeing,
I don't think I have it.
which I just lost. Do you have the Excel spreadsheets? I thought you were on the email.
No, I didn't get those. All I have is what Deb said.
Oh yeah, here's 429, DPW LM. What's LM?
Land management. That was the old land management. We had almost a separate division, so it still holds over in the budget. We didn't trim it.
425.
We just don't have the detail behind it, I don't think. We have it on the.
No, this is the salaries.
Yeah, land management is 429.
Yeah, it looks like the budget's for 115 and you're continuing that for next year.
Okay, that seems,
Well, but there's a line item there for contract trees, $50,000.
We don't, Sean, all we have is your rolled up budget. We can see the 429 line for 115, but we don't see the detail.
So the
Yeah, they
land
want me to-
management, we have land management here of 115. That's what George is saying right here.
Yeah, but that's as rolled up all the DPW budgets
Yeah,
all
exactly.
together.
Yeah.
But we don't have the detailed sheet for 429.
Do you
And-
want? All right. Do you want me to email it to Jeff right now, or you want me to share it?
well, maybe you could just tell us, do you have,
Okay.
within land management, you said the tree budget is like 50,000, or what did you say?
Yes. So there's contract trees in there, which is 50,000. Contractual services, which is the mowing of all the buildings and the fields, is another 50. And then there's police details, which covers the details that go along with the tree pruning and
Right.
takedowns, which is, it's a lot of details because you usually, this is mostly crane work. Another 10, and then some other expenses for equipment and everything else.
I
So
mean, I'm
in the budget is $50,000 worth of tree takedowns and pruning. In addition to that is currently we're using up what was from 2 fiscal years ago, a stabilization fund transfer at town meeting of, I think, 150,000.
That's right.
So what you saw, what we're putting out the contract right now is going to flush that to zero and basically use up the fiscal 2022 funds from the budget.
So my comment was basically like, why aren't you asking for more money, given how many trees come down and how much tree work you actually have to do or contract to get?
Because
done?
we're not doing capital. When you see the capital request, you're going to see between 100 and 150,000 requests. Advisory does not want to see this budget go up by 150,000 in one fiscal year.
Oh, so you're calling it capital instead?
Right.
That's what
Although
we've done in the past.
I don't think it'll be bonded money. I'm hoping they're going to use a free cash or.
Marion, we've had a tree line capital budget over the last few years to supplement it, so we don't have a spike in the operating budget. That's the way we've kind of done it over the last few years.
Oh, okay. All right. That's good. That's clarifying. Thanks.
There's a second reason also. The tree work's queued up and it doesn't really follow a fiscal. In fact, right now, I mean, we're using money from 2 years ago. It was best to just put the money in and time it as we see fit. We were basically working hand in hand with Eversource to make sure we weren't taking trees down they were going to take down, but we had the money when we needed to.
Okay, I mean, I could ask about the Eversource activity, but that's a different subject. I don't want to bring it up here now, so.
Okay. Anything else about the DPW budget from the board?
And does that same budget cover like emergencies, like, the Route 16 sinkhole or whatever it was?
One that's in my picture.
That's
Well, within the DPW budget, there is money for road materials. That culvert would have used up more than a year's worth of the budget.
Right. So I'm asking whether we need like a little more emergency, say, backup in this budget. But maybe not. That's your call.
You'd be hard pressed to convince advisory we should cover a massive catastrophic failure like that. It is covered under the yearly capital article that we do for the roadway management.
Okay.
Yeah, Sean, remind me, was that a chapter? Did we fund that one with chapter 90? Or that was another one we did chapter 90, right? That was the one by Delsis, right?
I used chapter 90 for the Dowses one. We had a little bit more time to stage that one. This one was, we found it Monday and fixed it by Friday. We could go back for a reimbursement, but we had we basically had the tail end of annual town meeting money to use.
Yeah.
And which just leaves the chapter 90 money in the bank, which we'll use this spring.
Yep, chapter 90 rolls over year after year. Absolutely.
So if Deb were sitting here, she'd shake her head. Yes, I like to close. It allowed us to close out an article, basically.
Yeah.
You had the one, that culvert on Farm Road though, too, about a year and a half ago also,
Right.
So we basically all these road issues are, things that haven't been touched in 35 years or look at. So.
This was way more than 35 years old.
Yeah.
I do want to, sorry. I want to recognize Paul, who has his hand raised, because I'm doing that.
Yeah.
And but before I do, real quick, I at some point, Sean, in the next couple of weeks, I want to have an offline discussion with you about culverts in town, just because we have a lot of them. They're a liability. In the town I work in, 3 have failed in the last 2 years. In the town I live in, like 2 or 3 have failed in the last 4 years, and it's becoming something that's kind of exploding, I think, all over Massachusetts. But yeah, Paul, go ahead.
Just one word that you've probably seen, that there's a call from the state for grant applications for culvert repair specifically.
There is a
Some
small bridge and
repair.
culvert repair.
Yep.
Mhm.
So my comment, if I could, was to thank Sean for the storm we just had, where we had like 20 inches or whatever it was, seemed like a lot of snow, at least a lot of snow in my driveway. And the roads in town did pretty well. Thank you very much for that operation. And I know we're having a potential ice storm tomorrow. And it's very reassuring. And I think most of the residents in the town feel very reassured that our DPW is out there and getting those roads clear and keeping us all safe. So thank you for this effort in the last storm.
Thank you, Paul.
I'll second that. That was really a great job, Sean.
Thank you. We excel at plowing, and I would hesitate to say that tomorrow's ice storm might be a challenge for us. We have a lot of rural and cold roads, and we don't like to overtreat with salt. So please be
That's a
careful in the
challenge.
morning.
Yeah. With icy roads in a rural area that's on wells, it's much more of a challenge than it is in an urban area which has water supply. Very, very different. Yeah. I noticed all the pre-treatment stripes around before the last storm. I was impressed with that. Okay. Anything else from the board? Paul, you still have your hand up, just, you know. Mhm.
We'll just add another comment, which is, as we've discussed before, both at advisory and here, that snow and ice has got a special statute that allows you to deficit spend. And if you appropriate more, you're locked in and you can't go back. So you want to keep your snow and ice at a low level, which gives you the flexibility to spend whatever you need. And whatever you need then doesn't tap into taking money away from other departments, at least during the budget process. Gives you that kind of flexibility. So the number for snow and ice that we use every year needs to be kept relatively stable and relatively low so that we have that upside potential.
As long as you do have, you don't destroy your reserve funds at the end of the year. You do have to be realistic. You can't, like, you know, you can't constantly double it every single year. If you're doing that, you have to adjust a little bit. That's my belief.
Well, I think the way to do that is to put the money in the reserve fund. So if you think, for example, you're going to spend 400,000 the upcoming year, and I'm just making that number up, and you've got, let's say, 30,000 is your number that you've had since 1900. You don't want to change the 30,000. What you want to do is to say, let's put 370,000 in the reserve fund, so it's there if we need it.
Okay. Well, either way, it's a long night ahead of us, and I think we're reasonably in favor of this budget. Like I said, I pretty much looked at the 0.64. Is there
The only
any
suggested change would be that gasoline thing to make that more realistic, because that's different than snow and ice. So,
although some gasoline I thought could be allocated to snow and ice, but that's another point, I think. Yep. Okay. Any other comments or questions from the board before I move on to recycling? All right. Thank you very much, Sean. Good presentation.
Thank you.
Well, are we doing town buildings though?
Oh, I forgot about that. Yeah, town buildings and transfer stations. Even more so reason to kind of move on, but yes, very good.
again, I see a very low number percentage side, so we don't need to dwell too long. I
I
mean,
need to beat it up. Yep.
good job, Sean. So
Do we want to go through this at all or no?
Where's the bottom line? Scroll to the bottom line again.
it's 290, so it's a
295.
339. It's actually gone down by 0.01%.
Without looking at the individual line
No,
items.
I'm sorry, that's transfer station.
It's 0.76% is town buildings.
Yeah. So it's
Okay.
295,034.
295.
Can you see the screen?
Yep. Yep. Very good. Are there any salaries in town buildings? Or is it all materials?
I think there's cleaning,
There's
which I think
The
is.
clerk of the works thing is in there.
Yeah, the clerk of the
Okay.
works stipends in there.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Not much. Okay.
This makes sense to me.
Yep, I'm just looking at the line items, the big decreases. Yeah.
But the only increase looked like water testing, but he must have found the money somewhere else, so.
I did. And again, for those that aren't familiar, this budget is basically a balancing act between the annual town meeting capital warrant for facilities and operating. It's just a balance of where we want to fund, you know, not what everyone considers the obvious operating budget, the electric bills, the testing, and the regulatory stuff. But you know, there's repairs and maintenance that's debatable what level you fund in your operating budget versus the capital articles. And again, I think coming from the advisory side this time, I don't think it's going to happen this year, but there's more discussion again about a stabilization, a maintenance stabilization fund. I was, myself and Addie Mae were bringing that forward last year. It didn't quite get enough traction. We couldn't find great examples of where it was being done. Now there's some others that are finding it. So I think we'll see that in future years. Again, that's not so much the operating, but it affects the operating. You'll also see at the very bottom, someone will touch on this later. You can see where we started netting some items out that belong in the IT department. So they're, you know, they net it out of here. They don't show a savings. They just, most of these are just moved directly over. Deb did that with several. I don't know, this is probably the first one you've seen. And then, you know, they come from 3 or 4 different places, a handful of items like this, and they land in what is now the new budgeted IT budget that you're gonna look at later. Transfer station?
Sounds good.
Not much changes there. We're in I think it's year 2 of a 3-year contract with the operators, Ruane and Father.
What are we paying per ton?
So we went up a little bit. There's a surcharge buried into the contract with Wheelabrator. It didn't go up significantly. I can't remember if it's a fuel. It's based on some commodity rate, and I don't remember what it was. That didn't go up much. This current year, right now, we haven't seen an increase on our tonnage for recycles. And again, I'll remind you, we pay $120 a ton to get rid of plastic recycles, which I can't do the math in my head. It's 40. I think it's 40% more than we pay to throw trash away. So it's unfortunate that's where we are, but that's where we are. We still are very, very fortunate that our residents do a great job keeping the paper and cardboard clean, because we're the only municipality I know of that's getting rid of that for free. We used to get paid for it, but that was a different world we lived in. But I would guess Framingham, and I know for a fact Natick's probably paying $100 a ton to get rid of their commingled, because they're mixing plastics, food containers, and paper. So we've been able to hold it. We captured the steep rise the past 2 years, so I held some of those, hoping everything stays stable.
Sean, if the town were willing to further separate trash like glass opposed to plastic or whatever, would that save us more money, or would that just not be worth the infrastructure changes that would have to be made at the transfer station?
Glass is an issue for the entire industry, and I can't see who's on here. I bet Charlie's on here, and maybe ask him. He's in the next.
He was on earlier. I can't see.
Yes, I am on. If I was waiting for my budget to come up, but this certainly is worth it. If we were to try to separate glass like we used to, separate colors of glass and things like that, what's happening with glass these days is there are people who are turning it into like aggregate for pavement, things like that. We would have to have a separate collection point and collection containers. We would still be paying a fee to remove this glass. I know Canigliaro came to us a year or so ago and wondered if we were interested in separating glass to send them that way. The only thing that we send to them for that kind of thing is now porcelain fixtures, which we do collect. That's fairly minor. It would be another training thing that we would have to do with the citizenry, and I don't know that it would be that great a savings for us. I think Sean said 120. I think we're actually down to 100. The last bill I saw for commingled, and we are down to 0 for paper. We were paying for paper for a while, but that commodity has gone up enough so that we're able to recycle that for nothing, as he said. So
Okay, thanks.
things are looking up in terms of recycling. Yeah, they're looking up really slowly though.
Very good. Very good. Yep, and who knows what the future brings with a lot of these. I mean, they've been all over the place since a handful of years, and I've been disappointed where I think, and Charlie might know better than I do, Massachusetts a few years ago lost one of its major glass recycling operations, and I don't think any new one's proposed to come in and take its place. And
you know, there's some actions in northern New England happening where glass recycling is sort of taking off and they're making it into various products, but that really hasn't spread to us, and it hasn't taken off like the people who are doing it had hoped it would in New Hampshire and Vermont, for instance.
And I've been disappointed to what I've seen in some of the state response to this. You know, communities have cried out and they say, okay, we'll give you more education, which is completely meaningless. You know, I'd like to see personally like tax credits or incentives to actually open up recycling plants. But, you know, I think, I don't know, that's far way off. Either way, I'll digress off my personal opinion on this matter. Okay, I guess any questions on this budget before us here on the transfer station budget?
Looks good. This
does look good.
Mhm.
I'm going to take this opportunity to just throw something in there as a slight update because it does somewhat relate to the budget. In case anyone hasn't been in there, if you go in there in the next few days, you're going to find out that facility's running on a generator.
Yeah,
We
thanks
had
for the prompt
a
action.
massive power failure.
Thanks for the prompt action on that, Sean, by the way. That was excellent.
Right.
Yeah.
I've been working all week since we found out we lost the 3-phase underground service. We believe it actually froze and the frost got into the pipe and somehow shorted out the wires. So we're on a generator and we're working with Eversource to figure out what we can do. We obviously can't just go digging up the dump, one, without DEP involvement, and two, we would need the frost to leave. So.
And is that going to be an expensive fix for the town?
Yes. Well, I've already spoken with Diane. We're going to try to claim it. I'm not sure if we'll be able to. I guess that would depend on your definition of expensive. It's not cheap.
Is there an insurance coverage for that loss?
That's what he's trying to find out.
I'm not 100% sure.
We don't know just yet, Paul. I'm gonna need to reach out to the insurance company, but I'm gonna need more information from Sean before I'm able to do that.
I was trying to gather the costs first, and it's still unknown how much what we're going to have to do to fix it.
I don't want to beat up on it, but I do have one quick question. He's talked about DEP. Is the underground conduit like within the lining of the landfill?
Well, yes. Remember, that entire property is a landfill. I mean, as soon as you drive by the shed, you're on trash. So the asphalt is basically the liner down there. I don't know that had clay liner, but it's asphalt lined.
All right.
So it's not a very long run. It's contained between basically where the swap shop shed is to the compactors.
Yeah.
You may end up putting in a pole and putting overhead wires. It might be a more practical way to do it.
Well, you're gonna
Alright.
pull the cable though first, right, Sean? If you find you can pull the cable, then maybe you don't need a new conduit.
Yeah, we're trying to melt the ice out of it.
Yeah.
Tomorrow, we're going to try to pull the cables and see if they'll come out. See if we can salvage the pipe. Usually when 2 3-phase 480 wires contact each other, they blow a big hole in something.
Or weld themselves to the conduit. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So that was all.
All right. So Charlie, do you have anything more or?
No, I'm sort of on the outside. I've barely been down there since the generator went in, but all I know is that the reaction was swift and we barely lost any processing time for the
Okay.
recycling or the disposal materials.
Okay, I just want to know if you want to talk anything more about the budget itself. Looks like it's I'm looking at this.
It's a good budget.
Yep. Well, net zero budget. So,
No, I leave that in Sean's hands. He does a great job with it.
all right. Anything else from the select board? All right. Very good. Thank you. We'll move on to the select board legal and IT budgets. Diane Morris.
Did you want to do the recycling budget while you're at it?
Okay.
It kind of just did, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, that looks
Yeah,
fine.
that's kind of what I thought we were talking about, to be honest with you.
Yeah, no, I really don't have anything to add to that.
Okay.
You can go ahead and pass along. We have zero differential and our committee is committed to working very hard to try and keep things going.
Yep. You guys do a good job there.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Charlie.
Well done.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Excellent.
Okay. And moving on, we have basically the core board. Still says BOS, but is that because that's an automatic thing? That doesn't matter.
I don't know, or it's maybe because we're near Boston. I don't know.
There you go.
I have a comment about this. The town administrator salary line item. I think what we're budgeting here is based on a contract that we're no longer obligated to. So maybe we could save some money by not budgeting this high.
Okay.
So the only comment I have to that is George stole my one comment I had in the whole budget. I
Well,
was gonna-
yeah, but I mean, we're gonna have to hire someone.
Yeah, but
potentially.
it's not necessarily going to be somebody who's worked here for 10 years and had increases. And, you know, I think we were at a very high end of the pay scale.
Maybe.
I think there's some, I'm just looking for opportunities of savings, and that was one that jumped out at me.
I was actually going to suggest somewhere around the 150 range. It's still reasonable. It's competitive. I think you get appropriate level there. There's also something the fact that the people who apply to this aren't stupid. They're going to see what you've budgeted, and when it comes time to negotiation, I think that's what they're going to base it on.
Well, we're also thinking of getting some additional services from outside in their interim. Is that not correct?
Oh, in the interim, yes, in the interim. But I think this FY23 budget is assuming it's full time. I was
Right.
thinking about, so in the interim, I know well, we've hired some past town administrator that helps out the interim town administrator for short money, like 10 grand or whatever, just fill in some gaps. There was some talk at one point of doing like a small, maybe $10,000, not small, but you know what I'm saying, $10,000 subcontract to help out with HR services.
Yes.
We've all talked about how there's a lot on town administrator that we might actually redo the town meeting, like the finance director, to actually make them come under town administrator. And we keep putting these things like IT and everything else that maybe, and everyone complains that the job descriptions are behind and performance reviews are behind. Maybe if we gave a modest subcontracted estimate for assistance with HR, something along those lines, might be worth discussion. Or even something else I'm thinking about is you could actually give a stipend to the assistant town administrator to kind of be an HR director with a third party, something along those lines.
Right. That as well. And also we're going to be talking about it here. We're adding in this IT budget with an IT professional. I mean, we want to save some money somewhere in order to pay that salary. So by taking down this TA salary, that helps us cover the costs of the salary that we're going to be adding into the IT budget.
So if I could, Eric, I wanted to reemphasize a point that I think I've made many times before, that HR now is very complicated. There's so many laws, and during the COVID period, the state legislature and the federal government has been making even more laws. We really need a professional HR function. That I don't see how a municipality can survive with amateurs doing HR work. You really need trained, professional, career HR people. I have no problem with sharing an HR person with other communities or doing it part-time. That's really what part-time means. It's shared with other towns. But I think we need to have a serious effort to have an HR function, a real HR function.
And I agree with something like that. I just think it's, at this point, I don't think we can budget and start negotiating with other communities, especially without a full-time town administrator. Remember, our interim town administrator is essentially doing two jobs, her old job and new job. I don't think we start negotiating with other communities. I personally like the idea of a modest fee just to subcontract some of the stuff you subcontract to a professional, come in and that kind of, there's a lot of stuff. Job descriptions are old, performance reviews aren't done. Our policies, frankly, we've talked about them, are just like piecemeal together. Someone that can help clean some of that up, which then if you hire internal staff or shared staff for FY 24-25, then they'll be better set up to do that. But that's one of my suggestions here.
There also are some vendors out there, I'm trying to think of the names, but things like HR on demand and stuff like that, where you enter into a contract and you've got an HR person that you can call, and just like we do with town council, where if you have a problem, you call, you get an answer, you're told what to do, or you have them prepare the form that you need, or the letter that you need, or whatever else it is. But we need to have some money for that.
I would agree, and it can be an interim sort of thing. When we have a new town administrator in place, then maybe we'll want to reconsider a permanent position, somebody shared with another town. But for now, we really do need this service. And I agree, Paul, it should be a professional.
So what I was suggesting here, and what I'm going to suggest is going to be maybe a small net increase. But I would like to see a town administrator be reduced to $150,000. I'd like to see a subcontracted services just for the order of $10,000 to see how it works out, and possibly even an HR stipend of $10,000 that can be put to either the town administrator or assistant town administrator that can help them and give them official responsibility of actually HR director as well. And again, work with the subcontracted services. So that's my thought on this.
I oppose the last item, but I support the first two items. The whole point I'm trying to do is to get the HR function away from the town administrator. For a lot of reasons, it doesn't work, and it's almost a conflict for the town administrator.
I just don't think you can do it between. I don't think you can execute that between now and
it's a function.
Yeah, I think a consulting, but you're okay with it being a consulting service, aren't you, Paul?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
That's why I say there are consultants who you can have them start tomorrow.
So we
wouldn't
have
try
a
to-
line, we have consulting services. If you look down below, it was at $25,000 in the 22 budget. It's now at 9,000. I think that's because some of the IT work maybe came out of there. But we do have a line for consulting service. It doesn't say HR consulting specifically, but the line items up above is the salary line item. So if we do consulting, it would be in the expense category.
Well, yes.
Short term, you ought to do a consultant. But again,
Yeah.
I've seen communities share HR people, and HR people want to work full time, and many communities can't afford a full-time HR person.
Yeah.
They frankly don't have that volume of HR business, so they end up working for multiple communities. But however we get there, they are out there. And whether we hire a consultant or whether we call our neighboring communities and see if we can't piggyback on what they have, what arrangements they have, whatever we do, it's not a long protracted thing to get it done. And I'm saying it's time. The time is now for us to have some real HR function. And I just don't feel the last arrangement we had where the town administrator was also trying to do the HR work really was, I don't think it really worked.
No, it definitely didn't work. But do you have a sense from your other towns, like I mentioned, we used to have 25,000 last year for consulting services, and now it's 9,000. Do we want to bump that up back to the 25,000 or something, you think, or?
Yeah, so there's two functions that the town doesn't have, in addition to one is the HR function. The
Yeah.
other is a town engineer. And so you need a big consulting line item because we don't have an employee that is a town engineer that we can have attend, meetings of one board or another and assist on all kinds of things and back up DPW work and so on. So we at this point, the only engineering services we get are what we either have from volunteers or that we hire as engineers. So I think we need a consulting budget that will allow us to have a town engineer, and I think we need a consulting line item that would support having an HR consultant.
I do want to jump in here because we're being a bit repetitive. I still contend that you cannot solely go to a third party. You cannot, to have an effective management in a internal department here, you cannot say, okay, that's up to this third party. They'll decide if you get a raise or not. They'll decide if you have discipline or not. That third party has to make recommendations. So I do disagree that we can, so you're right, we could start someone quick. There are companies out there, and from the very beginning, I started this discussion. I wanted to subcontract out some of this third party. We do not have time to go find an internal one that we share with other departments by FY23. And I don't think it's right to do that before a full-time town administrator starts. So I still support my contention that we do a modest subcontractor fee of around 10,000, and we do a stipend that can be allocated to either town administrator or the assistant town administrator to actually be the official HR that will actually make the decisions. If anyone saw the movie Office Space and saw the Bobs, no one wants a third party to determine their future. And it has to be someone who's working hand in hand with the other individuals. So I disagree that we solely go third party for FY23 to do all HR functions. They should be advisory and assistant only.
So just a couple of comments back. One is that you will have an easier time hiring a good town administrator if you have an HR person. I know I deal with a lot of town administrators, and I know that some would not even consider a job that doesn't have an HR resource for them. So I don't think it's a good idea to say, let's hire a town administrator and then deal with the HR function. If you really want to get a good town administrator, you've got to say it up front that the town administrator is not going to be doing the HR function. At least we need to go that far. Secondly, the point of having an HR person never should be making policy decisions. That's really up to the chief elected officers of the town to make those decisions. So if the issue is, should somebody get a 5% raise or a 10% raise, and should everybody get a 5% raise or a 10% raise, or what are we going to negotiate with the unions? Should we give them a 2% raise or a 10% raise? All that kind of stuff. Ultimately, that's us. That shouldn't even be the town administrator. Ultimately, those kinds of decisions, because they're budgetary, because they're so fundamental as to personnel, that should be a select board role in there. But that doesn't mean we don't need a HR consultant to do investigations, to look into HR issues like harassment, claims, or do surveys of what communities are paying and what raises are being done by comparable communities, and develop job descriptions and all that kind of stuff. That I see as more paperwork and management, but not decision making. The fact that an HR person may do a draft of a job description doesn't mean that that is the decision to be made. I would hope that would go to the personnel board and ultimately perhaps even town meeting.
So Paul, what you say makes a lot of sense to me, but we don't have that person now, and we're looking to hire a town administrator. and you say we'd like to have an HR function in place to hire the town administrator, but we don't. Do you think that having a consultant in place would do the trick, at least to get us through the town administrator hiring and then in?
Yes, I'm going to suggest as part of the town administrator search committee business that we make it clear up front that the town administrator we're looking for will not be doing the HR function, that we will make other arrangements. So whether we have it in place today or whether we get it in place later, doesn't really matter, because there's a whole market out there of town administrators that we will be foreclosing if we don't say that up front.
Okay, I'm gonna
And so
jump
the-
in. I see Sean has his hand raised. I want to recognize that. In a short time, this discussion has been happening. I just looked up Dover, and Dover does not have a town HR director. And also on the HR page, it just refers to the town administrator, assistant town administrator. I've looked at numerous town administrator ads. I'm talking countless over the last 10 years. And never once have I seen one that says it will not be the HR director. So I think I have a fundamental disagreement here. And I think we're kind of going down a direction. We're going to make a policy decision. We don't even know what we're talking about. I disagree that small communities have HR directors. Maybe there's an opportunity to share one, but I haven't even seen that to some degree either. Ultimately, Sherborn's entire staff that's not elected, it's got to be like 15 or something like that goes outside of police or schools or DPW. Either way, Sean, you go ahead.
I was just going to suggest, without myself getting in the weeds of that, the third line on this budget is a 000, human resources. Regardless of getting in the weeds of exactly how you're going to do it, that's the perfect place to just put that money. Town meeting votes one budget number, not the differentiation between a salary employee or consultant. I think it's appropriate to just do what you want to do with the salary line item above and keep the money in the budget. Put it there. You're 6 months away from even using
I agree.
it.
That's exactly what I'd like to do. I'd like to put 10 grand in there, and that'll be a stipend, reduce 165 to 150 and up the consulting by 10 grand. Paul and I have clearly made our I'd like to hear from someone else on the board. Their thoughts on this.
I agree with you, Eric.
Okay.
I think we
Yeah,
should.
the only thing I'll say is, although Sean's right about how we vote the budget, just total budget, I think we need to put money either in salaries or expenses, because you're going to be tracking that as a cost during the year. It's not just what's the total budget. It's going to be a line item that they bill things to. So I don't think we're going to hire a human resources employee in the next fiscal year. So I think it should be an expense budget. It's probably going to be a consultant, I think, don't you?
I agree.
It's not going to be that line item that 000 is a salary line item. So when that we want to make sure we have the costs tracking against the budget. If it's not an employee, it won't be in a salary line bucket. It'll be down in expenses.
I mean, like I said, I have my same approach. I think it should be in
Yeah.
both, because then you can
Well-
assign it to either direction you want there. I just in the few minutes that we're going on
Yeah.
about this, I looked up Dover, I looked up the town meeting page.
Yeah,
And,
no, I'm not disagreeing with you at all. I'm just saying that if we think we're going to hire someone, then we should put money in that line item.
Well, I think it should be a stipend. So I think it should be assigned to the town administrator, assistant town administrator. So you're not hiring someone, and that's just
Okay.
FY23. And we see how it
All
works out. And you do the
All right.
consultant,
Okay, that sounds good.
and that's consistent with surrounding towns. Because like I'm not convinced that small towns have HR directors. I've never seen it. We're not
So
even
do we-
5,000 people yet, and I don't think we even have I don't think there's even outside of the elected ones. I don't know if there's even 15 people in town hall.
Well, there is something to be said for somebody doing the HR function, be it a consultant or whatever, that gets to know the town a little bit over time. I mean, so if it turns out that there's the opportunity to share a part-time town administrator with other towns, I think we ought to look into it. But I don't think we have that. I don't think we have enough knowledge about what's out there yet.
Yeah. And actually, if you sub to an HR professional, a subcontract, they can actually poll other communities. They can go look at surrounding communities and tell you who has HR directors, who doesn't, and so on like that. Then you start the conversation. Frankly, if this if this model doesn't exist and you want to make it exist, because I think it might be a good idea to share someone among other communities, it might take 2 years to actually execute that.
Mhm.
You know, it might take time, frankly, you know what I mean? I like the idea and concept, I really do. But I don't want to blow up FY23 just for, you know, something which we have no idea if it even exists or not.
Right, we need an interim solution.
So the idea of putting additional money in the consulting budget, I agree with, and the idea of reducing the town administrator budget, I agree with. So why can't we do that?
I would like to do that. I'd like to add a 10 grand stipend under the item for HR director, HR resources.
That's the part I'm objecting to.
How would that stipend be used, Eric?
It'd be assigned to either the town administrator, assistant town administrator, just for FY23 to manage with the consultant HR responsibilities. Because no one wants to, and I was joking, but I'm not joking about if you've seen the movie Office Space with the Bobs, no one wants to sit in front of a third party and determine, you know, have some of do their performance review, or, you know, something along a review or appeal the performance review. You know what I'm saying? Along the lines, you need someone internal who works with you day in and day out that can actually do, you know, that you frankly have a bit more faith in. And I really believe in that.
I think you're right, Eric. I think that gives us time for getting a new TA in here to sort out. So next year we can truly do what would be the best thing for the town, and not just rush through it now and say we're going to do this for human resources. Let's do it this way, as Eric suggests. I think that's a good idea.
I support that.
Yeah, it's a temporary solution.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's not a
that's
permanent
exactly what it's meant to
solution.
be.
It's a temporary.
Exactly what it's meant to be.
So then if you're saying that if we put 10 grand up above in the human resources salary line item, we should also then maybe beef up the consulting services below. It was 25,000 last year and now we're dropping it to 9,000, do you think?
Yeah, maybe make it 20 and then knock down town administrator by 15, 818. Let's make it 150.
I agree. Make the consulting 20, the human resources 10, and the town administrator 150.
Perfect. I second that.
Okay, I'll relay that to Deb Secretary to make the changes.
Now, we're not voting on it now. So it's
No,
always up
no,
for
but this
discussion
is-
later.
It's
And I'll be interested to
it's
hear
our
that.
budget, so that's I guess it's up to us to make these changes. So
Yep. I'll be interested to hear advisory's opinion on it as well.
exactly. But it's good that we can make these changes before it goes to advisory. So then,
Yes.
I see Steven's on this meeting, so we don't have to present it before him.
all right, what's next?
I think, let's see if we
Okay.
got legal. I don't know what I have down here. I just have a mystery for me.
Yeah,
Let's do
Legal,
this.
looks like legal's next, but
Let me
that's
see what I have
that's-
here.
we don't need to repeat what we say every year.
Yeah, yeah.
It's at the level it's at.
We'll budget it snow and ice. I got it. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
maybe you could repeat it for me though, because I
Oh,
didn't
sorry.
understand.
Well,
what legal
I'll give you the brief description. You don't want to show lawyers that you have more money available to.
Yes.
Okay, I get it.
We have very good town council. I'm very.
Yeah, no, I know,
good
but I'm
with
just
it.
saying.
Yes. Yeah. We don't want the gods to see what we're budgeting for snow and ice either. So we're good.
Exactly. But that may be the first time I've ever heard lawyers referred to as gods, but
Yeah,
you know,
no, I'm
It's the snow and ice.
making an analogy, making an analogy.
Yeah.
All right.
No, they're lawyers, not doctors.
IT.
So this is IT. This is a new budget item.
Yes, it is.
Although we've had expenses previously.
We did. So what Deb has been working with Klaus and Sean actually on this IT budget. And we've kind of pulled everything together. If other departments had an IT line item when they had money in it, like police and fire and DPW, we transferred it all into this budget. And then Klaus has been working with Sean and is going to present a good budget to the board tonight. It's complete new budget with a position in it, because we do need I think we do need an IT person.
We do.
Great.
Yeah.
And this
I do.
includes Kevin's costs also, isn't that correct?
It
Diane?
includes
Yeah.
costs in there for Kevin, yes.
Yeah.
So Klaus is here tonight. And he can better explain this whole budget to you, and Sean is here with him to talk about it.
I have a quick question about that though, that Jeff just brought up. if we're hiring somebody to do this internal IT support, do we still need Kevin as well? Isn't that doubling it up?
Well, I don't know. That's the decision the board's gonna have to make. So if they decide to hire an actual IT person, then I would think that we wouldn't need anybody. It would be just the IT person going forward.
Maybe it's reduced. I don't know if you could fully eliminate. I look at anything we do, like, even like council will hire a special counsel, you know what I mean? Engineering department, like where I work, we hire consultants, to do certain things, stuff like that. You almost always need someone. And I can't say it in this session, but you've had certain circumstances where people want a third party to do searches and stuff like that. So which one is Kevin's actual budget? Is it this one here, consultant fees, 5,250?
Let me see.
And is the 10,000 Klaus?
No.
Kevin's network support, I think.
This budget never existed before, and Klaus is a firefighter in the fire department.
Oh,
So
right.
this was never a budgeted position previously, so it doesn't tie to current. And one thing I will say is both Kevin and Klaus have an enormous amount of embedded knowledge of the system that we have now. So even if we move to some future long-term solution, we're going to need them because of their understanding of the operating base that we have and all the configurations that we currently have. You can't just.
Oh, I totally agree, but I don't understand where their money's coming from. Klaus is entirely from the fire or police, but that doesn't seem quite right if he's going to be taking a bigger role in.
He has not been paid before this year. He was volunteering all this time.
I know, but where is his pay coming from? And
well, we can't see that here. I think we may need advisory to guide us on this. See, some of these costs were in other budgets. We had it distributed. We did this a few years ago. We used to have, you saw Sean's gasoline budget. We actually used to have gasoline in the fire department budget, gasoline in the police department budget, and in DPW. We merged them all into one budget like this. So we don't know what budget items have been reduced. We don't see it on this page. What budgets have been reduced because the costs are centralized here now?
Well, at just seeing the other budgets, it doesn't feel like they've been reduced $108,000, but I do get that we had, and just seeing it firsthand myself in this position, I'm seeing firsthand how, I don't know how else to put this, but some IT stuff has been messed up. And it's coming at a cost I think is greater than, frankly, $100,000.
Exactly.
I won't say anything more.
Especially you look at that cybersecurity line item. That's something we've never budgeted for, but we should.
Yes.
And it's grossly lacking in our town.
Remember,
it's some of it you've been spending.
Yeah.
It's not here.
But
hi guys, I'm on, and I'd be more than happy to go through some of this stuff line item by line item to answer some of your questions.
In 1 minute, though, in 1 minute,
Yeah,
I just want to ask the original question, just so I know that. I just want to know, just tell me which of these line items is Kevin and which one is Klaus. That's all I want to know. That's all I want to know before we go out and get bogged down with other stuff. So is consultant fees and network support, is that Kevin?
That's what we've usually paid Kevin out of the consulting line item.
Okay. So it says shift to use part-time person external. And the top, Board of Selectmen, still says Board of Selectmen, IT support, that 10 grand. Is that that's a salary item? So is that a salary for Klaus, who's already an employee under the fire department? So essentially it's a stipend of sorts?
I can't answer that. I don't know. Is that Klaus?
So,
were you working with Deb on this? Is that what that is?
That is correct. And so there's sort of two things in there. So working with David this past year in fiscal 22, he did start the stipend part of the way through the year, which is why you can see that there's a fiscal year 22 year to date of the $5,600. So that's been increased for fiscal year 23, not only to continue that particular position, but really ultimately start to buffer that towards a part-time IT position.
Okay, that makes sense. And it looks like it's and it's more than that, a reduction. It looks like it's and we're saving more than that by the reduction under like those two, IT consultant and IT network support. I definitely get that.
Yeah, and there's been a lot of different things. Again, obviously Kevin plays a key role in a number of different areas. So there are charges that have gone to Kevin that have sort of hit a number of the different line items. So I would say the majority of stuff does come from that networking support as well as consulting fees. But there's been other areas, particularly around equipment, that has been coming from other budgets that ultimately do pay for his services.
Two other items. One is that they've also been doing a ton of work on the library, getting it up and configured, the new phone systems, the new audio visual equipment in the public meeting space. So they've been doing, we have not reviewed the library budget yet. And I was going to point out here, many of these charges are coming from elsewhere. If you look at the IT phone charges and internet charges, which total around 30,000, those are already in the budget. It's some other, it says there, not connected to other budget areas. Those are all budgeted elsewhere and are now in a consolidated IT budget now, but they were in each department previously, I believe. Is that correct, Klaus?
Yes, that's absolutely correct.
correct.
I mean, there's certain things like phone charges, and again,
Yeah.
that's non-cellular charges, but
Right.
as well as internet, cable, cybersecurity, that we're really trying to work to consolidate here into this sort of unified budget, because we were seeing quite a bit of that where it was individually dealt with at the department level, and not all departments were necessarily categorizing it in the same manner. So bringing this together shows us a much better view of what we expect this total spend to be.
But if you look at the total of $109,000, 30,000 was those IT and phone charges that were in another part of the budget, and close to 30,000 is the cybersecurity that didn't exist anywhere else. That's around $60,000 of the total, those two categories. So I think it's a very good budget.
Just on the question of cybersecurity, the one thing that I know has saved other communities is insurance for cybersecurity issues. This doesn't include insurance. It seems to me that fundamentally we need not just having some software to help us with cybersecurity, but you also need the backup so that when your accounts are all frozen and you got to pay a ransom and all that kind of stuff, there's
Well,
actually
We
had
do
insurance,
have, we
Paul.
do have insurance.
Yeah,
Well,
It's in
we
a
had
different
that,
budget.
when we had the issue with the police station, it was covered under our insurance.
yeah.
terrific. So
And
that's
it's
not in
been-
this budget.
Well, because Meyer has been giving it to their communities for free. And now they're deciding whether they're actually going to charge us or not. But there was no charge before this. It was just part of your package plan.
So when we do the insurance budget, we'll be able to talk about the extent of coverage for cybersecurity.
I don't have a figure from them yet. They still haven't decided whether they were going to charge their members communities yet. It's still
But
too
this-
early for them.
This budget doesn't include.
There's no
cybersecurity.
insurance on this one, right?
Right, okay.
I do believe that there is a limited amount of insurance on our contract with Harbor Networks through Armor Point. Again, that's limited. We usually tend to see that communities have sort of a layered approach to the insurance, as you would expect. So, it is partially in there, but I wouldn't say that it's the full coverage we would want to have.
Could I ask Klaus or anybody else, where in this budget, or is it in this budget, a plan to equip town hall with the opportunity for hybrid meetings? Because I have the sense that we're going to be wanting to do hybrid meetings for other reasons other than COVID, perhaps. In the future, seeing as how much public participation is increased. So do we have the equipment? And if not, where does that come from?
It would not be in the operating budget, Marion. It'd be in a capital budget.
Marion, we did get a grant. Gino secured a grant for equipment for the hybrid meetings. I think we secured a grant of a little over $11,000. I'm not quite sure if he's ordered the equipment yet, but he was talking about it.
Oh, okay, great.
So we have a grant for that.
But any IT purchases of even individual PCs is usually in the capital budget.
Okay, and would that include service contracts and that sort of thing?
No,
Software updates?
it includes capital, which is assets. Unless it was embedded in the purchase price. Like we bought tasers for the police department that was a full service purchase that included ongoing service of them, batteries and whatever else they needed. So unless it's embedded in the capital budget is asset purchases.
Right, okay.
Okay.
Where, I have a question. Where is the consideration of additional ADA resources for those hybrid meetings that Marion was just talking about in terms of captioning or other services that might be needed by folks in order to take part in the town meetings and the hybrid meetings?
Well, town meeting, I don't think will ever be hybrid. The town meeting, can't even be Zoom, to be honest with you, being an open town meeting. So I think that won't be relevant. Right now, any public meeting where people actually attend a meeting must be ADA accessible. You cannot hold a public meeting there. So in that sense, that is has full accessibility. As far as kind of like the things about captioning and something like that, frankly, that'll be in the nuances as we study this. That's such a detailed question that I don't think that we're prepared to look at that where it's not even a line item yet. I fully agree with Marianne that there should be a consideration, and we're going to use that grant apparently to actually go hybrid. Because I look at today's meeting right now, and we're 2 hours into a pretty dry meeting. We still have 34 participants. This would have 3 people in in town hall right now, where there's a public meeting. So I agree that we're going to be going down that road at some point. But I think that's just kind of too detailed to ask about closed captioning and stuff like that. But once we go live, the same requirements exist. All rooms and all facilities must be ADA accessible to all people. Okay, any other questions, at least here from the board? Okay. This is something to chew on. I'll be interested in advisory's opinion of this as well. I really would. If nothing else, what do we have next? Sustainability Department.
SIT proposal. Let's see if I got, I don't know what I had. There we go. There's sustainability.
It says this, I don't have it here. Hold on.
I don't see it in the packet, but Dorothea, I just wanted to say, or whoever prepared it, thank you for giving us the summary of the grants and the income that's come into the town. I've been asking for that. It was great to get a summary of, and it shows that you have brought in a lot more as was presented when we established the sustainability coordinator. I think it showed $70,000 or $80,000 of grant income versus
thank you, George. I'm very positive we had a good year, and I hope it's going to continue like that. It was a 40. Let me just look at the annual report, and I was adding up the grants that Gino made and I made, and just to give you 3 numbers, I think 6,250 for the 2 grants I made through the Grinspoon Foundation for the school outreach, and $71,000 that Gino did through Green Communities that was for the town hall improvements, and also the streetlight replacements that Sean was finishing just before the end of the year. And then 7,100 for the charging station. And that's a total of, I think, 84,350. And that does not include 2 other things, which were like the 50,000 that came through Eversource for the transformer that helps us to add on more stations in the future. And then the other one that came was like a technical assistance grant that a group of towns were able to pull from MAPC for actually the regional residential let me just climate program. So that's essentially Natick, Framingham, no, excuse me, Natick, Ashland, Framingham, Holliston, Wayland, Sherborn, us, Arlington, Wellesley, Acton, and Westboro working together to do a large residential clean energy campaign where homeowners could basically get to systems at a cheaper price. And we would all work together to put on seminars and webinars and events to educate these people, those 10 towns. So if you added those 75,000 on top, I think that is close to 130. And it's really was an amazing year. And we hope to continue that work.
Well, thank you for your doing all of this. It's very educational, and it's all helping the community move in the right direction.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah. I also appreciate this summary as well.
Good. I'm happy that you guys had time in this very busy budget season to look through it. And I think it has been, we have done a lot this year. And with this regional residential climate program, we're really hoping to get homeowners to do the right thing. I don't know if you are aware of the new incentives that came through the Mass Safe program this year. And they are heavily incentivizing now air source heat pumps with a $10,000 rebate. And it's just mind-boggling. I had a resident on the phone this week, and she told me this was for her an absolute deal breaker. And she was planning to transform her house off fossil fuels within 5 years. And that's something that makes me very happy to hear that people now have the economic incentives to really say, gosh, this makes completely sense to me. Since we have so many residents on oil, the combination of like switching away from oil and doing solar, if they can, is a great thing, because the air source heat pumps are now really, really cheap to have.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much. And I apologize if I had shut down some windows if I've been frozen for a little while. Okay. Are there any specific questions for Dorothy here? What we have? Anything from the board? Okay.
Just a comment that amongst the articles on the town meeting is one that talks about climate change and so on. If we ever get to a discussion of that article, I think that should go to the sustainability coordinator to coordinate what she's doing with what that article proponent is thinking that the community ought to be doing. So I'm wondering if we could send her a copy of what that citizen article is, so that if there's any synergism there, the two of them can.
I think they've been in touch, Paul. I know the proponent of this article, and she's a high school student, a group of high school students, and they've gone to the energy committee already.
They have. All right. Good. Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah. And they will present to the Energy Committee next Monday. And the lead proponent for Sherborn, I think, has been reaching out to select board members to partake in that. And it's an amazing group of students. I had the privilege to be a member of the Sustainability Task Force. And I have to tell you, I worked in academia for a long time, and I'm really amazed with these high school students. They are smart kids, and they are outspoken, and they're, in my view, they are an asset to this community.
Makes you optimistic from next generation, certainly. I see Marion Nutra has her hand raised. I'd like to recognize her.
Yeah, I just have a small sort of administrative question. By making the sustainability coordinator and the Energy and Sustainability Committee or whatever a department, that just allows us to budget more clearly for Dorothea. Is that correct?
Does that go to Diane?
It's
mean, it's
not
a
a,
new department,
it's not a
so
new department. I think it's a new budget.
Yeah, it's just
The
breaking up the budget, so it's
sustainability
not-
is a new, it used to be in the select board's budget. And we
yeah,
asked her to make a totally different budget with just for sustainability.
okay, that answers my question. Thanks.
Yes, okay.
Okay. Any other questions from the board? Okay, that sounds good. Thank you very much, Dorothea.
Sure. Do you guys have questions about, I put in some line items for, we are hoping, of course, we get into the endemic phase of the pandemic and we can do some events in person. And I have been putting in a shoestring budget a little bit for, I think for events, I was planning for a banner for $250 and a table. And eventually also for a postcard that would go out to all residents to, when we start this regional climate program later in the year. So I hope to manage with that budget, and I don't expect to go over it, but it will be an interesting year for me since, you know, I'm hope to be live and out and about in this community and meeting people. And I have done some home visits, and but through the Omicron, basically my office hours died down, and I hope people will come back and we have more in-person conversations.
Overall, I thought your budget looked reasonable, Dorothea. Thank you
Yeah.
for outlining.
I agree. I agree.
Yeah,
Thank you.
absolutely. Okay. So without any further ado, I think we're done with the omnibus budgets, and thank you all department heads, and thank you all for great presentations and very thoughtful budgets here. I'd like to move on to number 6A. It's an annual town meeting draft warrant checklist. Essentially, there's 2 items on there that had requests to highlight. And I think there's a request from a select board member for the North Sherborn Water District formation of a working group, Mary Neutra and George Morrill. And Jeff, if you could put me into the waiting room, please.
I think I can.
And it's all yours.
Hang on a second. No, I can't. I gotta make you not be, I can't put the host in the waiting room. I gotta unhost you, my friend. Then I can.
I do that.
You could just walk away, Eric.
Yeah, just mute it and turn off your video.
Yeah, that means just.
All right.
I'll text you when you're back on the.
I'll get a glass of milk.
time.
Right. George Morrill and I have been communicating with a couple of others about the Coolidge Street development. And this is a warrant article that sort of grew out of thinking ahead of what may have to be done as we go forward with Coolidge Street. Basically, for those of you who don't know the whole history here, I won't give it all, but basically we have already approved or provisionally approved 2 big housing development projects on Coolidge Street, 120 rental unit project, that's a friendly 40B project, and a age-restricted development of 67 units, some of which would be affordable. And this would provide needed affordable and diverse housing options in Sherborn and help us to reach our 10% affordable housing goal. But these projects, of course, both of them are contingent on getting MWRA water through Framingham and a sewer connection to Natick. Without those things, these projects really can't go forward. And that will require intermunicipal agreements that have sort of been in the works for a long time, but have stalled because one of the developers has pulled out of one of the projects. And I don't want to get into the details of it, but basically the status of the projects are uncertain at this time. But if things were to fall into place, which they still may, we would definitely, as a prerequisite for intermunicipal agreement for water, we would need a water district to be formed. And this has been discussed a couple of years ago as to how exactly what the limits would be and what the the limitations would be on the use of that water, etc. But if we were to have a North Sherborn Water District, and if everything else were to move along, we do need to have a water district defined. A lot of this is out of our hands at this point, but what is within our grasp is to tentatively do the footwork that we'll need to do to create a water district. If by the time town meeting comes along, or the next town meeting, we're ready to propose a water district to the town, it would have to be voted on at town meeting. So the proposal here is that we create a working group to start just working on that.
Yeah.
And George, you may want to jump in here.
Yeah, I'll help you out here, Marion. I think what we need to do, this is what, instead of the whole board working on the language that we're going to need for this warrant article and setting up the boundaries and all that, Marion and I think like two of us, so we're not in a, you know, open meeting issue, then Marion and I are both familiar with this, could put together a group of people that can work on this to then bring the warrant article back to the select board that we want to have at town meeting. So we want to get working on this right away, so then we can get into the nitty-gritty details with a group of people that can have the knowledge to get this done.
And that working group would, of course, involve the select board, and George and I are volunteering for that. The other towns have included, for example, the lawyer. We would need the lawyer present. Ours is KP Law, Greg Corbo. And the same sort of composition that, say, Natick and Framingham have, like the town administrator, town council, the DPW director. Perhaps for us, we'd want the groundwater protection committee, the Board of Health, just the representatives from key players that have to be there to help us formulate this. And this is only a group to formulate a proposal, just an idea for a water district. It doesn't mean that it's going to happen at town meeting. We have to see how it plays out, but we need to be ready just in case.
So if I could, if we create a committee that has all of these people on it, that by law is going to trigger open meeting law requirements.
That's fine.
So I don't think that's where you want to go. So it's great to know what your intentions might be. But if we get into saying, you know, this person should be on it, that person should be on it, and so on, the use of the phrase working group doesn't work anymore. It's the open meeting law says not only a board is required to comply with the open meeting law, but any subcommittee of that board, and that would be considered a subcommittee. So instead of doing that part of it, I think we're all fine with you and George going forth and doing work on this article. And if you need other people to assist you, that you do something on your own that way without having the select board create this whole working group.
I think that would be perfectly acceptable.
That works, Paul. Thank you for clarifying that, because that's going to make it more efficient if Marion and I can just kind of run with this and get the help that we need from the brilliant minds around town.
Yeah. So I'd make a motion that the offer, gracious offer of George.
The three of you go find the TA, and Marion and I will deal with that.
Okay, and basically, that's basically what Natick did. For example, they started to negotiate a potential. They started to put together a potential intermunicipal agreement with their lawyer, working with the town's lawyer and the town administrator that really basically was kind of not there. and they did this, of course, as part of an IMA negotiation. So that obviously is not done in public. So that would also have to be the same sort of arrangement.
Yeah, I understand. I'm suggesting kind of a loose arrangement, but if you want to use the Diane Morris as a member, go right ahead and use it. You want to use Sean, include them.
Yeah.
But rather than our setting up a charge and designate categories and all of that, I'm trying to avoid it. That's why I'm saying just to accept the offer of you and George and go forth.
Okay, great. And we'll leave this as a placeholder on the warrant and then make the final decision later.
Okay. So I think we're done with that. So we can have Eric come back, Jeff, if you wanna. Jeff, I think you're muted, so.
Yep, I'll send Eric a text. And the next item that we're going to discuss is the lease agreement for the community center and cell tower leases. Are you presenting that, Diane, or?
No, that was at the request of Eric that we put that on the agenda for tonight.
All right, hang on. I gotta go find him. But we already voted on for the lease agreement on issuing an RFP, right, for bidders?
Yeah.
I went back into the minutes, but I didn't see that there was an actual motion taken.
We did.
on
We
that.
voted on that. I thought that to go ahead with the RFP.
That's my recollection also, but we could check the minutes and do it next week if we need to.
I'll double check again.
Well, why not make a motion to say, go ahead with the RFP?
Thought we did
There's
that.
no downside to it. And
Yeah,
rather than
that's
having
fine.
people sifting through old minutes, it's a better use of her time.
Yep. So be it. I move that we issue RFP for people interested in bidding on lease agreement for Sherborn Community Center.
Can I join the discussion?
Yeah, sure.
Talking about the lease. So there was a conversation I had with Chris Petrini and Diane about this. There's two ways to do it. You do an RFP and you have to say pending, because ultimately you need to go to town meeting, get the approval to exceed the last town meeting approval to allow us to go to 20-year lease, 10 plus 10 was that just that one-time event. So it still has to go to town meeting to get a 10 plus 10 and to get to a basic exceed 3 years, bottom line. So whatever duration you want to do it. Town council seem to think that it's cleaner to get town meeting approval, then put out the RFP. Or otherwise you got to put on an RFP and say pending town meeting approval. And that can simply muddy it a little bit. And so it can be done either way. It really can be. You put an RFP, you say pending town meeting approval. Town meeting will then know who the applicant is. You kind of see who the low bidder is and whatever else on there. But otherwise, they thought it was cleaner. And frankly, just pass the straight face test for procurement a bit better. If you get the approval, then you just put out an RFP and contract it. But
we have to do that though, because it expires next February. So we could, if it's not on this coming town meeting, we wouldn't be able to renew we wouldn't have a tenant.
But they're saying,
sorry.
Yeah,
yeah,
it's a chicken and egg thing.
Yeah,
you know, they're recommending that we do town meeting first, then put out an RFP. They said it's not the end of the world to do it the opposite, but just not the correct way to do it.
But I'm saying we don't have the time to do the opposite, because if issue an RFP, then we're going to have a town meeting to approve the bid, wouldn't we?
They're saying you should get town meeting approval first.
Yes, I think we have to do it that way, because we can't do it the other way, because we wouldn't have the bids in time for town meeting, and we can't wait to the following town meeting because the lease expires next February.
No, because it's the bids are basically like how much we're not appropriating funds for this.
Right.
It's like how much revenue. So you don't need the bids for town meeting approval. You need authorization to exceed 3 years. That's
right.
it.
Okay.
It'll be 10 plus 10. That's what the town meeting article is for. I'd like to recognize Sean.
Are you muted, Sean? No.
Well, I'll point out, I think you two were just saying the same thing.
I think so.
The calendar says you have to go to town meeting. You're gonna miss the date. The RFP will be sometime later because we already, that ship already sailed. What I might have missed, and I just want to clarify, I ran out of the room real quick. There's two things here. There's the community center lease. There's the cell tower lease.
Yes.
You know, it wouldn't be the end of the world if the community center lease just lapsed. I mean, we're not going to kick them out per se. But there is an issue with the cell tower lease up there that's, you know, Verizon is probably a little bit nervous. That if the master lease would go out, then Verizon's got a cell tower in a town building without a lease. And normally they like to see a long-term lease. Anything under 10 years usually makes them nervous, and it's actually about to lapse. So we want to fix that.
So we have articles on the warrant for both of these.
Right. And so we want to keep them.
And thank you for the reminder. So Sean reminded me of something when I spoke to council. I completely forgot it, but thank you very much for the reminder. There's actually three leases that we need to do. There's the community center for the, you know, using the community center. There's a community center cell tower, but then there's which one of the private land, which one of the two Sean, remind me, the two cell towers on two town forest lands or just one? And one of them doesn't expire for a while.
There's
and want to
two-
have some discussion if we put them all on town meeting at once, or we wait one town meeting cycle for the other one. Thank you for the reminder.
I'll explain real quick. Other than these two, there's there's two cell towers. They're both on town forest land.
Yeah.
One is just about to lapse. The one on Hunting Lane is just about to lapse. The one on Lake Street has some more time on it. They both fall under the same category. They're on Chapter 97 restricted land. So they take both a town meeting vote and an act of the legislature. So in my opinion, while you got me, it makes sense to bank these all together. Put them out to we're being asked for both of those cell towers to re-up. They're much more equitable if they have a long-term lease. The under 10, even on Lake Street, is going to be more sellable. There's probably more revenue that we'll see if we can hook another carrier up, and they're going to want to see more than 10 years left on the lease. So if we're going to go out to RP, we wouldn't want to do it 1 year and then a year later, because we're going to, you know, basically march up to the legislature after town meeting with the same exact article. So we bank them together. I mean, it would be multiple articles going to the state, but they're essentially the same process anyway.
So just a legal point here, Sean. I think we already went to the legislature on the issue of Article 97 when we made the change of use from forest land to the cell tower lease. We had to get that change of use approved, and the change of use has already occurred. So we need to look at this legislative approval, but I think it's a one-time event, and I don't think you need to go another time.
I think I believe Amanda looked at that from Petrini, and definitely the Hunting Lane one needs it. I don't think it ever had it, and the Lake Street one had a definite end date. So it looked like it needed just to be re-upped.
Let's definitely hold an executive session on this, maybe to clarify it.
Yeah.
Now, Sean and I had a meeting with Chris and Amanda on that, and and I think it's good for them because there's a whole board on this, no question about it.
Right, and the key is it needs an RFP either way. So that's what the town meeting vote was for. And Paul might be right; it doesn't need to go to the state, but it still needs to go to town meeting.
So if I could go back to the motion that I wanted to make, I wanted to authorize to put in the bank, if you will, authorization for the town administrator to issue RFPs as needed for all four. So at least we know that that piece is done. The question of whether we do the RFPs now or whether we do it later is not really relevant to the motion. The motion is trying to address the issue of, do we go hunting through old Board of Selectmen minutes looking for, did we already authorize RFPs on these, or do we need to do new RFPs? This is just to confirm that the authority is there, so that if and when we get to the point that town meeting is voted, we don't have to keep going back and try and reinvent the wheel.
Yeah, I like that idea. Essentially, like I said, bank the authorizations for all of them there.
Yeah.
Is that efficient? Is that a motion, Paul?
Yes.
Okay, do I have a second on that?
Second.
All in favor, Jeff,
Aye.
Marianne,
Aye.
George,
Aye.
Paul.
Hi.
I am also aye. That's a good idea. Now, the other question I had is, it's more of almost a political thing, but is there any pushback at town meeting? Would we be at any risk, given that we certainly need to go to town meeting to do community center cell tower, Hunting Lane cell tower? We don't need to do Lake Street, but should we throw it in with a bunch as Sean suggested there? Or would we just wait to another town meeting? Is there any pushback to these? Will people kind of like, will be any concern? Will it hurt our chances on having a passed, or you think it's fine to just lump them all together? They won't be together. They'll be separate articles. They won't be together, but you know what I mean? And basically include Lake Street this year is the real question.
I think yes. At least let's keep it on our list for the time being.
Okay.
We haven't finalized the warrant. I just would draw everybody's attention to the fact that I got sued many times on that Lake Street one from various neighbors, but we settled all those lawsuits after some negotiations. So I don't know if that same kind of opposition to it, people are used to it by now, and they have the benefit of cell phone coverage. When it wasn't there, and if you had a automobile accident or you had a heart attack on your front lawn, you couldn't use your cell phone to call for emergency services, and you can now. So I don't see that there's going to be any pushback.
I remember I was on the planning board, and I think it's the first time I ever got served in a lawsuit. Yeah. I think it's old hat now, by the way, but anyways. Okay, so unless there's any objection, we'll simply keep Lake Street on the town meeting warrant and move forward accordingly. And we'll double check on the Article 97 as well. I think it might be worth an executive session on that. Maybe if Diane can remember that and remind me of that as well. Okay, is that it for second bullet of 6A? Okay. Next up is a consideration of appointment to the Town Administrator Search Committee. So it looks like we have, I just want to say this summary. So it looks like we have one applicant from the Personnel Board, which fills the one seat for the Personnel Board there as well. We'll vote on. It looks like we have 5 applicants for the 3 citizens at large positions as well, just to kind of summarize where we're sitting there. It should be the background material. Yeah, Paul, go ahead.
So I have a suggestion that right now there's 3 select board members on it. We're going to add the one from the Personnel Board. I think we already voted that, so that should be pretty well set. That leaves 4, and there are 5 applicants, and all the applicants are really good. And so what I would like to do is to make this a 9-person committee and put all 5 of these applicants on the committee to serve with us. I think they all add different dimensions and would make a very strong committee.
Pat,
let's hear from the board.
Nothing against any of the candidates at all, but does that diminish the committee? It doesn't make it harder to work, plan meetings when you have to get 9 people. I feel like, I mean, yes, we have 5 great applicants. It's up to you. I mean, I'm not going to be on the committee, so I really probably should leave it up to you guys, but I just worry with 9 doesn't make it harder to have meetings and get things done.
It will be a more unwieldy meeting. I mean, it's just the nature of that. Yeah.
But we had a number.
Go ahead, Paul.
I think we had that number with the police chief hiring process, and a quorum is only 5 of 9. So as long as we're ready to go forward with 5, it's sort of self-selecting. So if
we had 7 for the police chief, Paul. 5.
Okay.
I think.
And we had more than 7 because we had the 5 of us.
5 of us, and then we had Chuck, Mike, and Vicky.
I think Paul's suggestion is a good one. These are 5 very different types of expertise, and the committee can still function as long as there's a quorum of 5 out of the 9. I suspect that they'll all be very much involved, and seeing who the 5 candidates are, they will have no trouble working together. And this just makes it a much easier process. It'd be very hard to eliminate two of these.
And there are people whose opinions I personally value and love to hear what they have to say. So I think it makes for a stronger committee.
Okay. So I'd like to hear from Jeff, just because he's you, me, Paul, Jeff, and I are on the committee there.
Yeah, I'm on the fence.
Yeah.
I hear everything they're saying, but I think one of my favorite quotes from Steve Jobs is, "You should never have a team that you can't feed with one pizza." So he was serious about that. So
It wasn't in the public sector.
nine people is a lot to have discussion with too, even if not everyone can make every session. It's going to extend every meeting a little bit. So I'd still prefer 7, but I'll go with the consensus.
The other thing to think about, it is, there's only, if with a group of 7, you have 3 selectmen. So you have remember, this is a TA that's going to be reporting to the select board. With a group of 9, it's 6 people versus, the three, there's only 3 selectmen out of the 9 versus 3 out of 7. I think that's something to think about as we form this committee.
All right. I see Paul's point.
You know what, Paul, and I am mistaken. We did have 9 for the police search committee, but we had 5 of us were selectmen. So we had a majority.
But here the select board is going to make the final decision. And
I know that. I'm just,
the idea is for this
I'm
committee
throwing out things to think about that you should think about when we're making this decision.
It is true. And we flex our process every when we did this, and we do a little bit with the police and so on like that. We had one else, we had 5 final candidates and 1 kind of outstanding. Past times with the town administrator, 3 I meant came before. It doesn't have to be 3, but the last time it was 3 came before the select board. We can start with 9 perhaps. My only concern is if the 3 members of the select board do essentially get voted out and 3 people essentially start coming in, because it is advisory in there, and it might result in maybe more applicants coming in. I don't know. We'll have to see. When we first meet, we'll have to set the rules of the committee. And before we go any further, I just want to at least talk to this board, the members that are on it. My intent, by the way, would to have the first meeting, and at the first meeting, we'll set up a structure, we'll set up the officers, we'll set up the meeting dates, but at least for the first meeting would be on Thursday the 17th, which is basically the next Thursday if there's not a select board meeting. So we're meeting on the 10th. Does anyone have any issues with the first meeting being on the 17th?
Nope.
Okay. Seems to make sense among us. I'm just kind of thinking this through, because I definitely see what George is saying there. Unless we set up maybe, what do you call it? Of these 5, we set up 3 voting members and what's it called when you have the non-voting members?
Associate members?
Associate members. Do something like that.
Or advisory members, or I don't know.
Yeah, because this is an advisory committee, but to George's point, there is a chance that the committee could vote to bring 1 or more candidates forward. That's pretty much not what the select board wants. Not just it wants, but wouldn't consider as a finalist. Maybe I'd like actually Jeff and Paul's opinion. Maybe we simply address that when it comes to it. You know what I mean? Or see how it goes. I don't know.
My comment would be that the decision ultimately is the select boards. So what we're talking about is only material if the committee decides to present only 1 candidate, and that candidate is one that the 5 of us don't like, and
even 3 candidates. I mean, they could bring 3 candidates before that the 3 members of the select board don't want. Because you have twice as many non-select board members on you do select board.
Yes, but those 3 are a majority of the select board, and if all 3 of us vote no on all 3 candidates, nobody gets hired. So ultimately the idea of a rebellion and a coup d'etat and the they bring in somebody who's,
Sorry if you guys heard that. My daughter had to announce they're having a snow day tomorrow. So.
Oh, really? I thought once they went to hybrid teaching last year that we would never
He just
have
came
snow
running
days.
in to say.
No lacrosse
Well,
either.
I'm looking at these 5 candidates, and to me, none of them look like particularly revolutionaries.
Yeah,
And
all right.
they're likely to have the select board and the best interests of the town in mind.
Oh, I don't doubt that. No, I don't doubt that for a second. I see what George's point there. All right. I'm fine with nominating all 5. If someone wants to make a motion as
so moved.
all right.
Second.
All right. All in favor, Jeff,
All right.
Marianne,
Aye.
George,
Aye.
Paul,
Aye.
and I'm also aye. I don't think I need a motion or a vote, but I'd like to ask the town administrator to just send out notices to all members that the first meeting will be for, let's just say 7 o'clock on the 17th.
Okay.
That's conservation.
Yeah, the only,
It always is. Oh,
That's what. So last meeting I thought we were good because I was like, oh, we're on an alternate, and then the snafu happened with the Zoom link. So
Yeah.
like, I need to get back to the other meeting.
well, I think we also, may have to
we can do
either
another day.
flex the time or the day, because we don't know. The problem with 9 is what George just said earlier. We don't even know if the other ones can make the 17th. They're not on the call tonight. So
No, I know.
Mary and Vicky are here, but I don't think the other 2 are here.
I think Carol D'Souza's on here. too.
Daryl's here, Bill Seymour's here, and George Fisk is
Oh, they
here.
are? Okay.
Well, everybody's on there. Yep.
And my goal is to have the first meeting just to set up the officers and then decide on a meeting date. You know what I mean? I don't want to just simply at that point, maybe make it Mondays except for the 28th. Yeah, Sean?
Yeah, for the public, you guys are the only ones that know the 5 members. Nobody else knows. You haven't told us who they are.
Oh,
except I think Courtney Ack is one of them.
Sorry.
You think?
Yeah. Say a word.
Yeah,
We have
Courtney
The
kinda
list,
gave it-
is, I'll read it off. I have it here. It's Mary
Thanks.
Wolf, George Fisk, Courtney Eck, Carol D'Souza, and Bill Seymour.
And can we have each of them say hello to the public?
That would be good.
Hey, go ahead.
Mary's the first
Yeah,
on the
Mary
list
Moore.
on our list. So
Yeah.
All right. I think the public knows who I am.
I see Carol D'Souza turned on her Carol D'Souza turned on her camera.
Yes, good evening. Thank you for your vote. And I'm probably the newest member and the newest resident of the town and serve on 2 committees of the town. So I hope that a new look at things might help to with some of the HR issues that may come up, especially given your discussion tonight about moving some of the duties in the future of human resource and IT from the position. It makes it for looking for different skills in the person rather than concentrating only on those. So thank you.
Oh, Eric, you probably should mention that Mary Wolf is the town moderator and has been chair of advisory and countless other positions, just to kind of, for the public,
Yes. Although I think, like Mary said, I think most of the public knows who she is. But yes, we may take that for granted, being like more engaged. Mary Wolf is a heavily
The other thing-
long-term resident. Sorry, go ahead.
Now, the other thing is that the select board should be the people who are telling us what we should be looking for.
Yep.
The select board needs to define what the position is, what type of person they want in there, what qualifications they want, and then the committee takes it from there and seeks to find someone who fills those positions. It's not the committee, I don't think, who should be defining what the position is.
No, that's right. No, I don't think there's any question about that. This is simply the, as we indicated, just the final recommendations.
Yeah.
Eric, Sean's hand has been up for a while.
But real quick, is William's iPad, is that Bill Seymour?
no, I think Rosemary Driscoll might be.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Here I am. I'm Bill. And I messed up my Zoom, and Rosemary, my wife, put herself back in and now I'm appearing as Rosemary Driscoll.
Should we call you Rosemary?
Got a nice, got a pretty nice beard there, Rosemary.
Yeah. Let me be Frank.
There you go. That's cute.
George is
Yep,
on here
George
too.
and then Courtney.
Yes, thank you very much. I'm delighted to be included with the group, and I look very much forward to it. I've already checked my calendar, and by golly, I'm available on the 17th. And I think it's going to be, just as an initial meeting, good for all of us to get to see each other, and perhaps those of us who don't know each other as well, we can learn a little bit more about each other and talk a bit about the history of the town administrator job in town. So I'm looking very much forward to it. And I think you've got a nice group of people, and I think we'll have some good success.
Hey, George, what year were you town administrator?
He's been town
19
administrator 3 times, George. Tell him 3
Yeah.
times.
The first time was 1974. And then sometime in the 80s, I served twice as interim. And yeah, it's been an interesting experience.
And I'll just add that George is not exactly a newcomer to town.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to throw in there, because you just asked him that. I'll just say that one of my actually earliest childhood memories is standing actually in town hall with my mother, seeing George Fisk as town administrator. I was 4 years old, 1974. And then, and finally, Courtney, and before you say something, I just want to ask, could you work with like a 6 o'clock start on the 17th, which then helps us?
Yeah, that would be totally fine.
Yeah, let's do something like that. Can everyone here make a 6 o'clock start on the 17th?
Yeah.
That would be fine.
Because Courtney has
I think
double
that's-
duties at that
Fine
there.
with
Okay.
me. It's fine with me.
And then if people kind of think about other times and days they can make it. But yeah, Courtney, say something about yourself, please.
Well, if you want to see me in action, you can go watch the YouTube recordings of Conservation Commission.
Then you also have Vicky, Eric. Vicky's on here too.
Oh, I'm sorry. I forgot about it. I was focusing on the citizens. Vicky, are you here? Trouble seeing everyone.
I am here.
Okay. Yeah, welcome aboard and feel free to say something.
No, I think that going through the last process with the police chief was great. Just have to, have a few of us be able to steer the ship. And, part of looking at this is if we follow the roadmap that we did for the police chief, I think we'll have a lot of success. But this group is pretty awesome. And I think with all the background they all have, we're going to be able to have a really great understanding of what's needed and be able to interview some great people. So looking forward to it.
Absolutely. And just as George indicated at the last meeting, Vicky was very integral in the police chief there. So I'm very happy that you're back on this. Now, Sean, is your hand left up or did you have something to say?
I thought I put it down. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Eric, can I just say one thing, please? I'm going to send out the appointment letters tomorrow, and it'll have the date and time of your first meeting. Could you please meet to make sure that you get sworn in with the clerk's office? So sometime between now and the 17th, all of the members need to be sworn in.
Do I have to swear in again?
Yeah.
Do select board members have to be sworn in? Because we're there serving as a select board. I'll double check with Jackie.
I'll double check that with Jackie and I'll let you know.
Well,
Okay.
the original motion that I made was to include any member of the Board of Selectmen who wanted to be a member. So we're there because we are selectmen. And therefore, I think it's not necessary to be sworn in again.
Okay.
But we'll do whatever Jackie, the town wants us to do.
Okay.
And
Thank
plus,
you.
if we had to be sworn in, we'd probably have to void the police chief search, and that'd be awkward. Okay.
Jackie's on here, and I think
I'm trying to raise my hand.
Oh, there you go. Hi, and Jackie.
Hi. So I think if the select board doesn't get sworn in, that's fine, but you guys will be, the 3 of you will be a quorum. So you'll have to post a meeting as a select board.
Yeah, we're used to that with the police.
Yeah,
Which
so if you don't get sworn in, that's fine, but you'll need to post a meeting as a select board, like attending the town administrator group. So I just
Yep.
want to make sure everybody's covered.
Yep. No, that makes sense. That makes
Okay.
sense.
Good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so did we vote on that? Did we take a motion to vote to appoint all five? Remind me, it's been a good 10
Yes, you
minutes.
did. Yep.
Okay, very good. All right. Thank you, everyone. And as always, I appreciate the volunteerism. And I'll see everyone on the 17th.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Okay, as we're wrapping up the meeting, are there any select board reports?
Yes, I have one. Jeff had his, go ahead, Jeff.
Oh, go either way. I was just going to say quickly that a team of Dan Sickle and Sam Nelson have developed a proposed sort of adjusted process for handling the ARPA funding. And they've created a really good document that I reviewed earlier this week, and I believe it was presented last night to advisory. So I'm Sam's here. I mean, I don't know if Sam's here, but Dan is here tonight. Dan is on advisory, and he's also, I think, the advisory rep to capital budget. And Sam's on several committees in town, including the landscape, helping lead the landscaping team on the library project. So what I would propose, this is just a select board report, it's not an agenda, that we put this on the agenda for next Thursday's night select board meeting, a review of the process for ARPA. And we will not only include those two, but I want to link in, I told Diane this earlier, link in Heidi and Deb as well, because they're very involved in it also.
Okay, that's kind of contradict what we discussed at the last meeting. So maybe we'll talk
Well,
about
it's a
that.
new proposal, it's new information.
Okay, yeah, Mary Ann, say something.
Yeah, this is also a select board report, but it's kind of on the same subject. I did jump into advisory last night, and they were discussing some potential use of ARPA funds. And since I happened to be there, they made a plea to the select board several times to please agree on a policy for use of ARPA funds. So I was glad that Sam Nelson and Dan had put together this potential strategy, and Jeff reported it now. There was this disagreement, or let's say no consensus. Last time we discussed this, some wanted to focus on capital items and reduce the tax burden by funding capital items that we would normally fund in other ways. And others wanted to focus on more permanent improvements of the town that would have a long-term impact and not necessarily happen otherwise. And this proposal that you'll hear from Dan or Sam or both next week is a very good compromise. So I just wanted to say that.
Okay.
I have another select board report if we're done with that one, or.
It sounds like we are, because we can't obviously vote or make decisions on any reports. It's just, I guess a request for an agenda item.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think it'd be good to have the presentation next week and discuss it, so.
And how do we look next week? These town meeting things take up huge amounts of time, and I was trying to avoid extraneous, because these ARPA funds are good for another 2 years. And I was trying to avoid to some extent, and they get controversial, and we're just hemorrhaging this money, or not hemorrhaging, we're bleeding this money off. You know, I think we're a fifth, we've used a fifth or a quarter of our entire allotment just for this piecemeal thing, which everyone knows I've been frustrated with. How full is our agenda item on?
Our agenda is very full for
I
next
know.
week, because there's also a presentation that the police chief wants to give on the regional dispatch center that we went to today, next week.
Well, the only thing I'll say, though, well, first thing, this proposal addresses your concerns, Eric. It talks about traditional capital projects versus special sort of, unusual projects. The second thing is, we're talking about meeting next Thursday night. We have a meeting, but we have Saturday. Right now, we still have that same Saturday is a full day meeting. So even if Thursday's busy, we could even perhaps add that to the agenda to the Saturday meeting, since ARPA relates to the budget process a little bit.
I think this is important to get on our next agenda, just because we had yet another ARPA. It's this trickle effect that every tend to have one little thing, and I think this is an important thing that Dan and Sam have worked on, that we need to get. We need to focus on. I know it's a busy time of year, but we need to focus on this. We need to make this determination at our next meeting.
All right.
And
Diane,
advisory-
how important is the
advisory
regional
ability.
dispatching that you were talking about? Is there a
I'm
critical
sorry,
decision?
I
I'll talk to you
didn't hear
offline. I want to know how, just let's think about how important that dispatching thing you went to today, how much we need to make a decision on that. I'm ultimately going to be deferring items. I just am. You know, as effective as we want to be at 10 o'clock at night, it just doesn't happen. And, you know, the budget, I consider the operational budget items, frankly, the most important items we talk about. And my goal is to not make Saturday an all day thing. All right. I'll talk to you, Diane, offline.
Okay, sounds good.
See where you put this.
Okay.
It's important, but I don't think it's the emergency that people think it is. I think, but I just want to stop the penny requests that come in and to keep knocking these things down, because people keep saying this. So I agree in that sense, it is important and that's being addressed. People have to understand. I keep hearing these false narratives of people think, oh, it's just for COVID relief and stuff like that. And it's clearly not. And I actually have someone that's willing to give a presentation on that accordingly.
Well, see, it ties in with the capital budgets that we'll be reviewing.
Yeah.
See, so I think that's why, if we have the policy in place, then we won't be necessarily funding every nickel and dime in our capital budget. We'll leave them in the traditional budget mode.
And I'm frankly not that concerned about a policy. I want to actually create a plan. So a policy still, I think, leads to a piecemeal approach to this versus an actual plan of how you're going to do it.
Could
All
I
right.
have a copy of this policy sent around to the?
It doesn't exist. Oh yeah, but okay. Yeah, see, that's why we're getting more confused here. All right. This is just any other select board reports?
Yes, I have one.
Yeah, go ahead.
I wanted to bring up the fact, just because it's timely, that you know, there was a bad accident in the middle of town last night when a truck got hit by a train. And I think it brings up the focus again of why does the MBTA not install barriers on our train tracks on a busy road like Route 27? Paul, do you know kind of what the channels would be to try to get the MBTA's attention that we should have gates at that intersection?
So there's a contract between the MBTA and a private operator to operate those and maintain and make improvements. But yet, the one who's in control ultimately is the MBTA. So you need to start with the MBTA. And we actually have a representative to the MBTA who serves on the advisory committee for the MBTA, the advisory board, I think they call it. So we should start with that person. I just don't remember who it was.
I've seen it in a town that I work in, that actually the MBTA pushes back on new gate crossings. So just it's costly. That's the bottom line. They're costly. And they're somehow regulated by, I believe, and Paul might have, the DPU, Department of Public Utilities, oddly has some involvement with gate crossings. And I don't know why. And I could be wrong there and someone can correct me, but I thought like they had some kind of regulation on those things there. And ideally, actually, what you can do, you can actually have every crossing in town gated, and you can actually have a what's called a silent crossing. They don't have to blow the whistles. So right now, if you have meet certain standards, and we probably actually would do with some kind of maybe mitigation agreement with the MBTA, because clearly they're going to reuse that. They're going to use that line for something else. They didn't invest millions of dollars to replace all their rail just to keep it at 20 mile an hour, couple car freights at a time. They didn't tell Sherborn at all, but they actually piloted some kind of commuter to Foxborough, like, I don't know, 10 years ago or something like that. And I think it just takes someone to keep the air to the ground and know what's going on there. And at some point, if they want to up the speeds and up the ridership and up the frequency of trains, then you'd request something like that along mitigation. And it's strictly becoming engaged with your legislative body is what it is. And we're kind of in this quasi thing where between, we still have, what's his name from Natick as a rep, but in 22 it's going to change. And what's
Carolyn Dykeman, she actually just announced she's resigning, so we don't know who the next rep will be.
And she's resigning before the election too, isn't she? Yeah, resigning before the election.
Who's that? Rebecca? Rebecca Rausch?
No, Caroline Dykema.
Oh, is she? Yeah, but we have Linsky through the end of 2022.
Yeah.
Calendar year.
Yeah, but it's
2022.
difficult because he doesn't need our votes anymore. I'm not
Doesn't
trying to
need
be,
our
you
votes.
know,
No,
Machiavellian
no,
about it.
he's called me twice in the last week.
Yeah. He's decent guy, and I think he'll do the right thing. But it's just different there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
We
gate
just sent it-
crossing.
I wanted to bring it up just because it was timely with what happened last night. I think, we have a situation. Our school buses cross that train track, and I know the school buses take extra precaution, but still, I think it's way past the time, especially the other crossings, not even so much as I'm concerned about as 27. 27 is such a busy road with backed up traffic. What happens if the traffic backs up and a train starts coming and nobody can move? Like
That's why they have to go slow with it.
No, I know they go slow, but still, I mean,
They can stop.
The toughest one
Unfortunately-
actually is Hospital Road going to the high school. When you start going to the high school, that Hospital Road crossing is tough too.
Yeah, no, I know. Thankfully, it's not a jump on Hunting Lane, thanks to Sean anymore. So,
Yeah.
but anyway,
The train's been there forever. My dad grew up next to the tracks here in Sherborn, and it's always been a challenge. It used to be dual tracks, by the way. That's why it's so wide on one side. Got tore up before World War II for the steel. Anyways, all right. Anything else? Any of the select board reports? How about town administrator report?
Yes, I just have a couple of things, Eric, I want to report on. I want to let everybody know that Gino has secured a cybersecurity training grant from the Commonwealth of Mass Executive Office of Technology Services and Security. And it's a year-long program, and it consists of an initial assessment, which will be sent to town employees, and then a final assessment will be done at the end of the year. And during the year, there will be 4 assignments for the users. And at the end of the year, a final assessment we've done for the town as a whole, and we'll see how we make out. It's a great opportunity for the town.
Yeah.
And also,
Yeah.
I want to say thank you to Cindy Ostrowski from the Conservation Commission. She's been working with the Central Mosquito Control Program, and they have decided to do a townwide presentation on February 15th, starting at 7 o'clock, that even the residents will be able to go and ask questions about how they work their program, about opting in and opting out and what it all means. So that will be on February 15th at 7 o'clock. And also I wanted to say that Zach Ward graduated from the Chief Officers Program held last week from UMass Boston and the Mass Municipal Firefighting Academy. So we're happy and proud of him that he was able to finish that program.
Excellent. Excellent, Zach. Not surprising. He's a very sharp guy. All right. If there's not anything else, I'm gonna call this meeting adjourned. It feels weird not to go to executive session, yet it feels very nice not to go to executive session. I definitely want to keep this model up to the extent we can. Absolutely. Okay, do I have a motion to
adjourn?
Moved by George. Do I have a second?
Second.
All right, all in favor, Jeff?
Aye.
Marianne?
Aye.
George?
Aye.
Paul?
Aye.
Okay, I'm gonna say nay because I'm just having too much fun.
Chuck's not here. Chuck's not here. All right.
All right, have a
All
good
right,
night.
see you later. Have a good one.
Ciao, guys.